got a fair bit on tomorrow night.
It's a resolution.
We certainly couldn't do it Thursday night.
I've got nothing. I've just got to go by red tie.
Yeah, I just saying.
Okay, we're nearly there, so hang on, everybody.
It's showing here that we're live now.
Webinar is now streaming live on the custom stream lining service. Welcome all.
Mute you.
I said that, Alison, is good.
And thank you all for joining us in the meeting. Meeting closed.
What's that? Members of the public are advised the meeting will be live streamed and recorded, and the live stream and video recording will be made publicly available on YouTube and Council's website. Welcome everybody. We did have a few technical difficulties, so my apologies for the late start, but we'll get straight into it. Nillumbik Shire Council acknowledges the Wurundjeri people who are the traditional custodians of this land. We would also like to pay our respects to their elders, both past and present, and extend that respect to other Indigenous Australians present. Almighty God, we ask your blessing upon this council. We pray for guidance in our deliberations, and we ask you to grant us wisdom and sensitivity as we deal with the business of our Shire to achieve the best outcome for the people of Nillumbik. Amen. We have no apologies, but we do have a presentation. As many of you are aware, we had the 2020 Queen's Birthdays Honours list announced a week or so ago, and it's great to see members of our community recognised for their achievements in the Queen's Birthday Honours list this year. Appointed an Officer of the Order of Australia, AO, in the General Division was Jan Vittorio Sardi for distinguished service to the film and television industries as a screenwriter and director, and to professional guilds. Congratulations, Jan. Also awarded a Public Service Medal, a PSM, was Dallas John Riley for outstanding public service to policy and program delivery in support of community safety in Victoria. And I'd also like to make special mention of a former councillor and Shire President of the Shire of Diamond Valley, David Charles McKenzie, who was awarded the Medal of the Order of Australia, OAM, in the General Division for service to community health and to federal and local government. So congratulations to you all, and very well done. Could I have a mover for the confirmation of minutes for the OCM held on Tuesday, the 26th of May, 2020? Moved Councillor Clark, seconded Councillor Rankin. All those in favour? And that is carried. Thank you. Are there any disclosures of conflicts of interest for tonight's meeting? If not, we'll move on to petitions, of which there are none, and no questions from the gallery. We have an advisory committee report. Could I have a mover for the recommendation 00620 as per the papers? Councillor Ashton.
So the recommendation is that council notes the minutes of the following meetings.
I think there are public questions.
Oh,
I'm
Excuse
just
me.
asking governance. They've just told me that, but I wasn't aware.
Yeah, there are.
Just one moment, Councillor Ashton.
Sorry, Councillor Ashton.
Well, point of order, you've got a motion on the table, you best deal with it now.
I think that was just about to say that, Councillor Perkins. So we will keep going with that, Councillor Ashton. So resume and we'll go back to the questions.
okay. So the council notes the minutes of the following meetings. Inclusion Advisory Committee held on the 20th of February 2020. Houghton Hill Bushland Reserve System User Group Advisory Committee held on 20th of February 2020, and the Positive Aging Advisory Committee held on the 1st of May 2020.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. Can I have a seconder for the motion, please? Councillor Brooker. Councillor Ashton.
No, it's okay. I don't wish to speak tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Brooker. Can you unmute yourself, please? Can you unmute yourself, please, Councillor Brooker? Thank you.
Apologies. It's a good summary in the documents. If people want to find out what was happening in those committees, just have a look. It's well summarised.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brooker. Are we ready for the question? And it'll just be a short delay. The questions are coming to me.
Did we vote?
Yes, all those in favour? And that is carried. Thank you, councillors. The joys of having meetings via Zoom and YouTube and COVID are never ending. Won't be a moment. Our first question is from Ben Ramcharan. The Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Program will provide over $700,000 for community and road projects, which will help supplement rates in Nillumbik. Given we are all likely to have a 0% rate increase this year, it is especially important that Council takes full advantage of this money. In particular, residents have been talking about the possibility of roadside maintenance in research in North Warrandyte to improve drainage and road safety, new walking paths, landscaping and accessibility improvements at the research shopping strip, electric speed limit signs outside St Andrew's School and improved parking at Eltham Station. Question 1, what process will Council use to decide how the money gets allocated? And 2, how does Council plan to consult the community on which projects should take priority? In answer to your first question, Ben, what process will Council use? The response is the Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Program defines the requirements for eligible projects, and there's a wide range of technical information along with community feedback helps inform that picture. I note some of the projects you mention are already in our CapEx program. And the second question, with specific reference to this grant, there are constrained timelines on delivery of the project requiring completion projects being funded by 30 June 21. The consultation undertaken from the budget, which includes the capital work program, will be used as a point of reference in line with Council's asset renewal priorities and ongoing community feedback. Thank you, Ben. Alexander Colam. Question 1. The member for Menzies recently spoke in Parliament on his 28 May 20 announcement that the federal government had unlocked $5 million in funding for Nillumbik Council to use for upgrades at and around Simmons Lane Main Road. To Council's knowledge, is this the same $5 million that was already announced for this project in February 2019 by the federal government, or is Council expecting to receive a second lot of $5 million for this project? There is only one lot of $5 million for the Urban Congestion Fund that Council are aware of for upgrades in this corridor. We've identified a number of potential improvement opportunities which need to be worked through the detailed planning phase. Question 2, to Council's knowledge, what progress has been made on the commuter car park upgrade at Eltham train station, flagged to receive $6 million by the federal government as part of the Urban Congestion Fund? Both the state and federal government commitments for commuter car park upgrade at Eltham are being led by the Level Crossing Removal Project. Their advice is as follows. The Level Crossing Removal Project, on behalf of the Victorian Government's Department of Transport, is evaluating all available options and undertaking geotechnical, ground condition, service location and environmental investigations as part of early development works. We're working with the Australian Government through its Urban Congestion Fund to deliver more car spaces for Victorian public transport users, including at Eltham Station. Early feasibility and site assessment is underway currently for the construction of new car parking spaces, improved lighting and CCTV at Eltham Station. Broader community engagement will be pending outcomes of delivery determination and direction by state and federal departments. I'm sure you're aware, Alexander, that even though these announcements are made from beginning to end, it takes a considerable amount of time before things actually start to happen, because often we don't have the planning in place. Bill Lord asked Council, at a previous Council meeting, Councillor Brooker said he should be able to tell the people of Apollo Parkways what is going on with the sale of the 14 parcels of land located at 13 to 26 Whittingham Circuit, Greensborough, as part of the Civic Drive residential development project. So I ask, when will Council be paid by the developer for the total estimated $4 million owing on the land? There is currently no contract of sale in place for these parcels of land. Council's working through the next steps to achieve its objective of selling the land at the earliest opportunity. And that is the end of the question. So I'm sorry about the confusion there. We now go on to our first report, which is 09320, the adoption of the budget 2020 to 21, declaration of rates and charges. Can I have a mover for the motion, please?
Happy to move that, Mayor. However, I'd just like to make an amendment, if I may, please. I believe the officers should have that by now.
Won't be a moment, and we'll put it on the screen.
Mayor, this will be, I understand, the substantive motion when it finally comes up on the screen.
Correct, Councillor Clark. So you can see the changes in red, which are in addition to what was in the papers.
So if I can just highlight to councillors and to the public, if I may, that this year it will be, sorry, can we just go back to the papers again? Thank you. That the zero rate increase and include borrowings to a total of 3.303 million. I'm not going to read out all of the dot points because it's quite lengthy. However, that's the motion that's on the table before I speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rankin. Can I have a seconder for the motion, please? Councillor Clark. Back to you, Councillor Rankin.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's prevalent just to go through, this seems like a bit of deja vu here, that I think I've had part of this speech a couple of times over the last 6 or 8 weeks, probably a bit longer. When this first came up, I moved the motion at a 2% rate increase, and that was before COVID came in, and before a lot of people were unemployed, and has certainly fallen on hard times. It's also prevalent, I think, to be able to go back through a little bit of history as well. And when we came in, a number of us applied to or ran for council because our rates were so high. If we go back to the previous council between 2012 and 2016, over that time, over that 4 years, our rates increased by 24.6%. Over the council previous to that one, 08 to 12, our rates increased by 23.06%. So in the 8 years prior to us coming in, and there was a big shift. There was 6 out of 7 new councillors here, and congratulations to Councillor Perkins for holding his seat. But that was an increase of 47.65% in our rates. Let me say that again, an increase of 47.65% in the 8 years prior to us coming in. In our term, our first year, we had an increase of 0. That's right, 0. Our second year, we had 1.95, and our third year, we had 2. I moved the motion of 2% originally, and now I'm moving the motion of 0, because there are plenty of people doing it very, very tough out there. Not only did the previous council increase our rates over 8 years to 47.65%, but they also borrowed $20.192 million. $20 million. And here we are. We have actually paid back over $3 million of that. We are now saving our ratepayers an exorbitant amount to the tune of over $400,000 a year in interest on those loans. This council has been very active. We've managed to receive over $9 million in grant funding, both from state and federal. So I'd like to say thank you to our state and federal members. They have certainly assisted us along the way. Compared to the previous councils, where they only borrowed, they only managed to receive $900,000 in grant funding. We, as a council in our time, have contributed $7.7 million in capital work towards that grant funding as well. Councillors, I urge you that tonight I've put forward the motion of a 0% rate increase and a borrowings of $3.3 million. Let me just say that borrowings does not mean that we have to draw down on that money. It means that it is there, that the officers still need to come forward to council to be able to allow us to adopt those borrowings. It does not mean that that money has to be borrowed. It does not mean that money has to be borrowed. Okay? We have got some capital works that still needs to be funded. We've got applications into both state and federal to be able to try and capture some more grant funding to assist in getting these projects up and going. We don't know what other funding opportunities there are going to be coming forward. However, if we do not put this money or allow this money in the budget to be able to allow the council, whether it be us or the next, to be able to borrow that money, then it's going to be the community that suffers. However, the community will only suffer if the funding cannot be supported. By allowing us to put the borrowings into the budget, it allows us to be able to support the funding, to be able to get additional works done around the community. The people that will benefit out of this are our ratepayers. Our ratepayers will benefit by allowing our officers to be able to borrow and support this. I'll leave it at this point. Thank you, Mayor, for the moment. But please, councillors, I ask you to support the motion of a 0% rate increase and allow us to be able to put in that motion or put in that line entry of $3.3 million in case we do get that funding support. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Rankin. Over to you, Councillor Clark.
I reserve my right at this stage to speak later, Mayor.
Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Ashton.
Thank you. I first would like to thank the community for all the submissions they've made around the budget, and particularly some of the recent emails that I've received, mainly from rural people. This budget has had to be adopted during very difficult and unique times, with few certainties as to economic outcomes or recovery. And I think those stresses are starting to play out on many in Nillumbik. If we look at the recent revaluations, which I believe are still yet to be endorsed by the Valuer General, they indicate that on average, commercial properties CIV has increased by 2.33%, industrial by 2.79%, and rural properties on average by 4.73%. Residential generally has only increased by 1.48%. So different councillors will have different tensions and different issues in their wards. I have the research industrial estate in my ward. The Eltham industrial estate will also be impacted by any significant rate rise. I also have a lot of rural properties in my ward, and they will be facing a disproportionate increase in the rates rather than the standard residential properties. The median property value of rural properties went up by 6.12% compared with an overall increase in the Shire of 2.33%. The suburbs of Kinglake and Strathewen had an average of 15% change in capital improved value, and St Andrews followed closely with 10%. So I think when I look at the averages for the CIV changes by ward, Bunjil is 6%, Blue Lake, which is 2%, which also contains a lot of rural properties. Sugarloaf is 4%, LS 1%, Wingrove 1%, Edendale 2%, and Swipers Gully 1%. I think that to impact a rate rise greater than 0 on anybody at the moment during the time of COVID would be unfair. And I think that we as a council have been fiscally very responsible. We've managed to work closely with state government to achieve some great projects. We've also managed to do a great digital transformation, and I think we'll still be able to manage keeping a 0% rate increase and also potentially having borrowings of 3.3 million. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Brooker.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, let's be very clear. A 0% rate increase guarantees one thing only, that Nillumbik will require a loan of 1.153 million to meet its capital expenditure needs of 32.87 million as per dot point 13 in the budget papers. This extra provisions is contingent upon projects we may or may not get in the future. What is certain is that we will require a loan of 1.153 million. So that means our rates will be higher for the term of the loan than what they would otherwise be. You know, pick a number. If it's 7 years, that tends to be a common number. Our rates will be higher than what they would otherwise be if we had increased the rates this year. That is a sugar hit now and toothache for the next 7 years. That is what this budget has guaranteed. It is preventable. Make the decision now to visit the dentist, have the treatment, and enjoy not having to assume that uncomfortable, awkward, painful position for the next 7 years or whatever the term of the loan is. It is necessary to point out that in terms of hardship, there have been 177 hardship cases as at the middle of June that have negotiated a time extension with the Finance Department. For those that can do the maths, and I have done it, that is less than 1% of our rate notices. Not to say there is no hardship, but Nillumbik residents, thankfully, are prioritising their rate payments, you would conclude. The council, through the council plan, had a target of 0.25 points below the state government rates cap. It did not have a council plan action of 25 points below the rate caps and borrow the difference. It did not have a council plan action of a CapEx program that is underfunded by the equivalent of the rates cap. It is a fundamental betrayal to deliver 0% rate rise and then borrow the equivalent of what a 1.75% rate increase would deliver in respect of additional revenues. You ought to address the problem of the 1.153 million through service provision, through CapEx, any number of ways. None are attractive, all are preferable to the easy, lazy way of letting future councils deal with the loan provision. It really is, the circumstances are that we can borrow $1, that'll be it for now. And people will talk about what we can borrow in the future, that's good, but we're going to have to borrow this 1.153.
Thank you, Councillor Brooker. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Turmeric.
It is very poor management to take out loans just so we can seem popular at the moment. We have committed to a significant amount of projects which have brought in state government funding, and we need to honour those commitments. We have hardship facilities available for those who need to make an application to council, but otherwise we need to go up incrementally rather than cause an issue. We've already cut into our reserves. We've already cut renewal funding on our facilities, and now we are going to borrow, kick the can down the road, make it the next council's issue, and they won't have the benefit of the reserves, won't have the benefit of things being up to date in renewal. So we'll expect people in the future to do this. Councillor Rankin was saying that he's very proud of how we've saved $3 million. In the same breath, he's saying we're going to borrow $3 million. It doesn't make sense to me. The $20 million that we borrowed, the last council borrowed, was to build the Eltham Leisure Centre. It is a regional project which is of huge benefit to the whole Shire. And again, we have other small projects. We're about to look at the Ben Freeley Reserve in Hurstbridge. Money will have to be put aside for that. If we don't do it responsibly, it's just going to cause pain into the future. So, and the argument that we need to do it because rural people's rates went up this year, we weren't aiming to borrow money to compensate the people whose rates went up last year. The shift was away from rural to the township. So rates are going to move. It's still going to end up the same size, and all it does is just change the pieces of the pie. But to borrow money just so that you can keep your people's rates down is ridiculous. So I won't be supporting the budget, and will be supporting a 1.75 increase in rates if this motion fails.
Thank you, Councillor Demery. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, the one thing I've been is consistent on this about a zero rates. That's where I started in January, and I haven't deviated from it. And the reason for that is very simple. We can afford to do exactly this. It is true to say that there will be a greater burden on rural ratepayers in this calendar year as a result of the various valuations. But in short, we've had many choices to make along the journey, which many of the councillors did not wish to take up. We could save $730,000 by not proceeding and continuing to debate a new EBA with our staff. Some might say that's a really hard task, but the hundreds of thousands of people out there in employment world well understand if they've got a job, they're really well off. Our staff all have a job. They're not looking for 2% increase in the course of the year. Now, you might say that's a harsh thing to say, but these are difficult times. And if you're ever going to say to staff, this may be not a time to argue for a 2% increase, then my view is it is this particular year. So I've got no problem with a 0% increase, and Councillor Rankin's already gone through the massive rises in the past. There's two other things quickly to say on this. The first one is about the borrowings. This is an unusual budget for us because normally we know what the state and the federal budget is going to do. And so we're able to take into account that, and we know clearly what's going to happen going forward. This year we need to include borrowings because we don't know what's in the state and federal budgets. We do know that there are a bunch of potential stimulus packages out there, some for which we would put in only 10% of the money and we'd get 90% granted to us. So we might borrow $100,000 and be granted $900,000. And so we're looking to see whether we might take up those opportunities to value that. And that is certainly good value out of those very small borrowings. Equally, we don't know whether the federal government is going to come good with the $500,000 for the Greensboro Hockey Pavilion. And I didn't hear Councillor Brooker, which is in his ward, saying, let's not do the Greensboro Hockey Pavilion and not spend that money on CapEx work. He still wants to do the same and larger group of CapEx works that the rest do. And so if we do that, we don't have to borrow that amount of money. So Councillor Rankin rightly puts in an amount of money in this budget that says that will maximise potentially all of the stimulus package. And if the grants that we might anticipate don't come through, we've got ways to cover it off. But equally, if they do come through, the borrowings that we're currently looking at may not be actually required. This is a very good budget and very well considered and structured well for the future.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Perkins.
So Councillor Clark says that he's been consistent right through this. Far from it. Far from it. In January, councillors know we're all there. We're all at the workshop where the push from Councillor Clark was 1.75%. That was supported by Councillor Brooker. The rest of us are at 2%. We're all at 2%. That's why the draft budget went out at 2%.
Mayor, I cannot be misrepresented in the situation. I've consistently argued zero. I've never changed. And so for others to start to suggest contrary is a misrepresentation of my position.
We all remember we all remember where we were and the conversations had. And it was it going to be 2% or 1.75? The overwhelming majority of councillors thought, to be fiscally responsible, we need to move away from the council plan, which was 1.75%, to be 0.25% under the rate cap, and the push was for 2%. So it went out. The draft budget went out to 2%, as Councillor Rankin said. He actually put the draft budget out, and it was at 2%. Now there's been a push to go to 0%. It's fair to say that most of council were very uncomfortable with clipping the staff and affecting the staff to achieve that 0% rate increase. Also very uncomfortable about amending the capital works. So the option is to borrow. So we're borrowing $1.153 million to offset that 0% rate increase. So this is $1.153 million that council has to borrow to cover the shortfall this year. That shortfall exists forever and it will compound. So next year, council's bottom line will be the same amount short, plus the money that we have to find to repay the loan, and plus the compounding effect of that. So look, I don't think anyone coming into council, if you put to anyone who is on a board of management, that is it a good idea to cut your income and then borrow to try to counter that, they would say it's not a good idea. We often listen to officer advice. The paperwork's a bit misleading, and that sort of says recommendation that we go to 0% rate increase. But we know that that's certainly not the recommendation of the bureaucracy. We know that's certainly not the recommendation of the CEO. We know it's certainly not the recommendation of the Chief Financial Officer. We know the recommendation of the council officers is to go to 2%, to be at the cap. Now, 2% is not a great amount. It's been capped by the state government. In past years, yes, you're right, Councillor Rankin, there would have been a great reluctance to borrow money, and council, would have perhaps put the rates up by more than 2%, to fund the sort of grants that we're seeing come forward now. We didn't have a lot of grant opportunities in previous councils. I can put that down to a Liberal government mostly, because there were no grants. There were no grants provided by the Liberal government. We're very lucky at the moment, but I don't support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. Right of reply, Councillor Rankin.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just recap on a couple of points. I'll go back to Councillor Dimerick's point. To take out loans to stay popular. To take out loans to stay popular. What a comment to make. I look back at the previous loan repayments over the last 8 years, and your predecessor, Councillor Dimerick, allowed for loans on average, year on year, of $200,000 each year, if not a little bit more, to be able to keep Edendale Farm going. This council has been managed to be able to cover the costs without having to borrow money to keep Edendale Farm going. Save $3 million to spend $3 million. We've actually saved in excess, I think, closer to about $7 million. And that includes, and I'll come to Councillor Perkins's point of view about the compounding effect. I understand about compounding effect, but let me also say that borrowing $20 million over the last 2 terms of council, this council and our ratepayers have had to incur the interest repayments on that. Talk about compounding, we're copping that, and our ratepayers are going to keep copping that interest repayments for about the next 10 years. We've been able to really pay back a significant amount of that. So compounding effect, we're doing extremely well. We have covered, we have not borrowed at all in our time, in our 3.5 years. Here we are, we're not actually borrowing, all we're doing is putting it in to the budget to give us that flexibility to be able to borrow if we needed to. However, both state and federal governments in this time have also significantly borrowed money to be able to keep the economy going. And here we are to do the same as well. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Rankin. Well, despite everybody's opinions, we still need to vote. So all those in favour of the motion as put? All those against? I'm waiting for someone to call a division. And that is carried.
I'll call a division.
Thank you, Councillor Rankin. All those in favour? Councillor Egan, Councillor Rankin, Councillor Clark, Councillor Ashton. All those against? Councillor Dimerick, Councillor Perkins, Councillor Brooker. Thank you, and that has been carried. Our second item of the night is 094-20 Equine in Nillumbik. Can I have a mover for the motion, please? Councillor Ashton. You unmute yourself, James.
Yeah, we've got to unmute yourself. It takes a minute.
Sorry. So I'd actually like to move the motion with an additional point. I think we've got a copy of that additional point to come up shortly.
Won't be a moment, Councillor Ashton. There you go. The line red is the addition.
Thank you. So the recommendation is that the council adopts the Equine in Nillumbik plan, inclusive of the ACOM reference document, attachment 2, notes the public submissions received, attachment 3, and authorises officers to commence implementation of the action plan and refers the plan to the 21-22 budget cycle.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. Can I have a seconder for the motion, please? Councillor Clark. Back to you, Councillor Ashton.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank all those that attended the various workshops, as well as the 426 people who completed the online survey. Many did so on behalf of their families, thereby giving council information on approximately 900 horse riders, their recreational activities, their volunteerism, their properties, their expenditure, and their land management practices. I also need to say that no one was precluded from completing the survey, which was promoted and available on the council website, and did have space afforded for those who wishing to just make a comment. This survey attracted the best response of any survey conducted by council so far, and has allowed us to capture data on a recreational activity which has existed in Nillumbik for a long while, yet has never been quantified before. The extra 150 submissions received last week are some responses to the main topics of the plan. In total, the plan has received approximately 165 in support, with 9 against and 2 that were unclear. All 12 clubs in Nillumbik made submissions, as did NAGS, Riding Develops Abilities, and the Yarra Valley Equestrian Landcare Group, indicating that the report was well written and the actions appropriate. This plan will facilitate well-being, recreation, tourism, economic development, and ongoing land management activities. It shows that 89% of horse riders are female, with an age range of 5 to 85, and it shows that this group is generally underrepresented in other recreational and sporting activities. It highlights the huge volunteerism that comes with being a member of the equine community and the support of RDA and other horse therapies by residents. The actions to enhance participation, club stability and volunteer effort are similar to those other sporting clubs already enjoy, but being documented, it may help clubs working with council to apply for Commonwealth or state funding. Whereas currently, if you have no plan or strategy, you cannot apply for any funding. We'll also give guarantee to volunteers that support equine activities, as well as RDA and other volunteers in Nillumbik. It shows that these clubs are totally self-funded. There were no figures in this report with regard to ongoing costs to council, as there are none. Maximising the use of equine infrastructure makes sense financially and also should help capacity of clubs. Again, this is no different to the various audits and infrastructure plans we already do for many other sporting clubs. Many respondents hope that we might at some time in the future have just one indoor arena in Nillumbik. When compared with what we have provided to other sporting groups over the years, this is very modest. Yet again, if we do not investigate its feasibility, we shall never be able to apply for funding should the opportunity occur. Unlike Macedon, whose now defunct plan wanted to create a world-class international equestrian centre, in fact, best in the whole of Australia, the horse community in Nillumbik have very, very modest aspirations as far as their requests go. Safe off-road shared trails, which benefit all, were also a major theme and go to support the work that we're already doing with our recreational trail strategy. The horse riders who created many of the tracks and trails that we all enjoy today have been moved further out, and are just asking that we continue the work of improving the trails that are shared by all. This report captures how much the equine community spends, and many of these businesses, particularly the agricultural and feed businesses, have been around for many years and fit well within the Green Wedge. The data confirmed that this is a significant rural activity and underpins the Green Wedge with a lot of its work. The survey first captured data on 330 rural properties, with 70% of respondents spending a minimum of 1 day a week working to look after their property. 72% they have or will attend land management workshops, many talking about belong to land care groups, and the majority of submitters talked about responsible land management. Not one horse owner responded negatively to the actions that council has included in the plan with regard to weed and pest management and further education on keeping horses in Nillumbik. As a council, we have to offer parity and accessibility to all those who enjoy various recreational activities and not discriminate. So I'm very happy to support this plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ashton. Any other councillors? Sorry, Councillor Clark.
I'll reserve my right to the stage.
Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Jemerick.
I'll be supporting this plan. I just want to be fairly clear that it is not an economic development plan. If you do the maths on the numbers in there, apparently of the 900 riders, each of them spend $19,000 a year for their hobby. And the beneficiaries of that are 24 people. So if it's an economic plan, we could all take $20,000 and give it to 24 people. I'm sure we'll make them wealthy. But it is a plan that needs, it's work that needs to be done, but it needs to be refined. The economics in it is not great, and it also has a lot of circular references that refer to other Nillumbik documents that sort of claim that things are substantiated without only by referencing the other documents. If it was a sports or people of interest and looking at it as a hobby or as a sports program, I think it's a good thing. There are definitely underrepresented, a bit like dog owners in the area. So I think that part of it needs to be pushed, but it needs to be treated as what it is. It's a hobby for people, and seems particularly for older women and to a lesser extent young girls. And I think it needs to be supported. But I think the work behind it and the need to sort of rush it through and be secretive about it leaves a poor taste. And no need for it. It's a solid document that would stand up on its own. But the froth and bubble around the side, unnecessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demerick. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Brooker.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm glad not everyone reserves their right to speak, because there would be a very dull meeting, I think, if everyone did that. But there's been an enthusiastic support of this plan by the various horse and pony clubs within Nillumbik. Certainly the plan will be added to the 47 or so plans and strategies that are available on the council website. That is a good thing. And in fact, it's the only thing for a number of submitters that the equine plan would now have a formal status within council. That was sufficient, and I don't think that is an unreasonable position at all. In respect of resourcing the plan and obtaining assistance and read that funding for various infrastructure-related projects, the equine industry will have to join a very long queue. The point from many submitters was that they wanted to get into the queue. That was the first step. And so I would just say to them, they're at the starting line now, but they are at the starting line. It is not the finish for them. I would say that in the allocation of resources, a plan is helpful, but it will still have to establish on its own merits its case for funding moving forward. It's not an unqualified right of assistance from my perspective, but more importantly, from the submitters, it wasn't a perspective that they had either. I tend to say, a right to object is not a right to prevail, and this plan for the equine industry is not an automatic right of assistance. For those in the community, I would say, I think, just a personal note well, before I get into that, a rather pragmatic, I think, tone to what I've just said, but I do want to thank all the submitters that provided their time and input to contribute in a meaningful way to the plan. That informs us councillors. Without that, we are less informed and I think less able to sort out a good public policy position from and just an industry advocacy position. So we have to take all that information on board ourselves. So thank you for those submitters to providing the heart and soul of the document. Without their engagement, it would just be a little bit words on a piece of paper. I don't want to single anyone out in particular, but I do wish to say to those people collectively, you've really put some fire and passion into that document, and that was a credit to all of you. Councillor Ashton, I'm out of time, but Councillor Ashton commented on Mark 4 about Workshops, they're important moving forward. The equine industry isn't going to be engaged in those workshops about land management. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooker. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Perkins.
Look, thank you, Mayor. Look, my concerns around this document have really been the process, and look, I think it's been improved by the broader public having another couple of weeks to contribute to it. Certainly from those that have contributed, there's overwhelming support. That is largely, I would say, the horse lobby. Not that that's a problem in itself. I look at the document, I just sort of think, had the community been engaged a bit more broadly, like I can just imagine people from my ward, they might have been interested in trail riding or whatever. I know myself as you know, a kid and a teenager, you know, the only place you could go trail riding locally, there wasn't many. There was one in Whittlesea, I think, and we used to go to Uncle Ned's towards Wallen, but there's none of that offer here in Nillumbik. And I just sort of think, you know, by broadening the scope and not sort of trying to be so insular amongst just the current horse lobby, you might have got a bit of a better result. But you know, it is what it is. If it does help to attract some grant funding and make the sport more accessible to more people, I don't think that's a bad thing. Happy to endorse the document, but I think, you know, moving forward, you want this document to be supported in the rural area, in the urban areas as well as the rural areas. I think there's been a really heavy concentration of, you know, this is a rural issue, this is rural, and you've sort of forgotten that, you know, there's 5/7 of the community that don't represent the rural areas. So I think, you know, just sort of moving forward, you know, I'm not opposing the document, but the way that it was kept secret from council for most of its life, up until only a relatively short time ago, and it was sort of you'd say almost, you know, rushed through and tried to be kept secret from the community, hasn't been the best process. And I think, you know, moving forward, these sort of documents should be available to council at a much earlier stage, and so you've got the full of council that can help to you know, support it or feed into it. But, you know, the opportunity for 5 of the 7 councillors has been very limited, and that's the only criticism I would sort of say of the process and the document.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. Councillor Clark.
Councillor Rankin put his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Rankin.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to clarify a couple of things, Councillor Perkins. That you believe this document has been kept quiet. We've seen it around. So if you have a look, it's been there. We've discussed it many times, and it's been on the table. I think also it's the biggest sport for women, perhaps. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's quite big in our community, and certainly not just for older women either. I know a lot of young women that are out there. I think we recently gave an award to a young equine lady in the chamber when we were still meeting in the chamber. But they're just a couple of points I wanted to pick up. But my understanding is the biggest sport for women, and this document has been on the table, and we've discussed it a couple of times. So maybe you're off skiing that weekend.
And it's an Olympic sport.
Equine, absolutely.
Sorry. Have you finished, Councillor Rankin? We've had a few technical difficulties here.
Yes, no, I've finished. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. We lost sound for a moment. Councillor Clark.
Councillor Brooker seemed to be agitated. I don't know whether he needs to say something. I'm happy to.
No, I just had a question through the chair. There was put that, you know, horse riding was the largest female sport. It surprises me that Councillor Rankin says that as being involved in social infrastructure, but I can think of football, netball, basketball that would all have greater participation numbers. But, you know, if he thinks horse riding is number 1 now, that's
I didn't say number 1.
It's not accurate, but that's just how it is, I
I
suppose.
think maybe he might be referring to the fact that it's an all-age sport. You can still, we've got riders. Our first senior citizen of the year was a rider in her 80s. I think that's
I
what
didn't
is.
see the question from Council. I didn't see
Right.
the question from Councillor Drucker. I only saw a second.
Back to you, Councillor Clark.
Thank you. Look, just briefly, I'm wholly supportive of this. I have a pony club in my ward. I've got to say, of all the different sports that are in my ward, this is the least supported by way of the council support to this group. They don't even have really appropriate toilets for what they've got. So if there is ever a need for an infrastructure plan for equine sport, this is a document like this. I mean, there does seem to have been a reluctance on a behalf of some of the councillors to want to support this, almost looking for reasons not to, and a predisposition to want to seem to provide some sort of nuanced undercurrent that Councillor Egan and Ashton, who happen to live in the rural parts of the Shire, have pursued this. Why wouldn't they? There are a lot of people ride horses in their part of the Shire, as there are in some of my end of the world. I mean, I'm very happy to support football and basketball and netball and all those other groups. I'm very pleased to say we're spending nearly $3 million on the Eltham Football Club, of which they're not putting in a cent. And they wouldn't have got without our support. But that doesn't mean equine sports aren't equally as appropriate to be able to see the support of council. And I think they've been a much neglected group over the journey of this Shire. Equally, there is a business that sits around equine sports and the facilities that they need and equipment that they need, which equally we lose money to other shires for, and again, a capture that we might be able to make going forward. So there is good reason for looking at this particular program, and one that, as Councillor Ashton picks up, should be pushed forward to the next council budget cycle. It deals with opportunities after we've done some further work on opportunities for participation and promoting riders with disability programs. And that might be something that needs some funding going forward. Or indeed, once we've completed the infrastructure plan, then it would be something that goes into those sorts of programs and to be able to achieve funding. Why wouldn't we target trying to be a centre of excellence in this area, as we are in other sports? For those that seem to be reluctant or seem to think there is some undercurrent of, you know, if you're for this, then you must be against the environment. I think that is a very unfortunate view of life if you hold that view. This is a sport where a lot of women, and it's a dominant sport more for women than for men. And that's another good thing. Again, there are more women starting to play football and other sports, but why wouldn't we support a sport which is dominated effectively by women? It is as indicated, an Olympic sport. And one which we, you know, and I am pleased to be able to support wholeheartedly, and hopefully this will grow in our Shire over time. I commend the resolution.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
And thank the submitters as well, because they've done a really good job.
I'm sorry, Councillor Ashton, you don't have a right of reply because nobody's against you. All right, we still have to vote on this. All those in favour? And that is carried. Thank you, councillors. Our next report is 09520, the Economic Development Strategy 2020 to 2030. Can I have a mover for the motion, please?
Moved.
Councillor Clark. As per the papers?
As per the papers.
And that is it up on the table. Can I have a seconder for the motion, please? Can I have a seconder for the motion, Councillor Ashton? Over to you, Councillor Clark.
Mayor, in short, look, this has been a piece of work done in conjunction with the consultant group, looking at how we might grow the business base of council and the businesses within it, to seek to ensure that to the maximum extent possible we can grow jobs in our own municipality. The obvious benefits that sit around that, particularly in the current COVID environment, is that you don't have to go to other municipalities, you don't have to drive anywhere, you don't have to go by public transport. So the extent to which we grow jobs in our own locale, everybody benefits. I've been very impressed to see growth in business in the Shire in the last 3.5 years. I was exceptionally impressed at the seminar that was run by our small business team with respect to women in business in the Shire. A number of smaller businesses working from home or in small spaces right across a whole raft of different industries was exceptionally impressive, and what we can do to continue to support them and build a plan to support them is something that we could continue to do. Can I also just say, I think a plan such as this becomes a base document. I would encourage councils following us to continue to pick this up almost on an annual basis and go, how's it going at being implemented? Can we do it better? Are there other things that we can do? I don't think this says everything about this space, but it is a really good base document and is something to build from further. Certainly my experience when we were first elected was that we did not have a program to the extent to which I think a number of us would have been as proud as we are now that was in existence. We've improved our skills through our staff team, and I'm very conscious of the work that Rosa does in chairing or in being the director of that particular area, but the work that Danny O'Felland and others are doing in that space is second to none, and their work that they're continuing to do in conjunction with the Chambers of Commerce, again, is excellent. So I commend the resolution and just suggest that everybody continues to work to build on the opportunities that this presents.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clark. Any other Councillor Ashton.
Yeah, I think locally the businesses have been really well supported during the COVID crisis, but we are seeing some close. I hope that our economic development team have been working really hard to support local businesses with webinars and things online, and also keep them up with the sort of changing landscape out there. And I've had a lot of feedback saying that people have been contacted by councils to see how they're travelling, if there's anything we can do to help them. And I think that's part of our new, if you like, our interface with all the different groups within our Shire. With this plan, I think it's very respectful of the Green Wedge, and it tries to articulate what's sensitive and appropriate. And I think that things like open doors, open cellars, open studios, and as well as the equine support and also agriculture, regenerative farming, all those things can be included in the Green Wedge. I think it'll be interesting to see how things fall out of the housing strategy and also the activity centres. Yeah, no, I think it's a really good piece of work, and I endorse it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Booker.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, the cold hard truth of the strategy is that the process of councillor input into it has broken down. To explain what has occurred, the strategy's been out for consultation, submissions received, that's been all fine, we've heard some of them. On the 2nd of June, the strategy came to councillors minus all of the measurement metrics in Appendix B, which ought to have been there. The indicators to measure success were missing. The document we're considering tonight now contains those indicators. I know this because I was the one who went through the 35 action items with suggestions at how those actions might be measured. And I think the officers have done a good job of putting some real measurements against those actions. That's good. The problem is the completed document should have been in our briefing papers on the 11th of June for discussion and final evaluation from councillors on the 16th of June. That did not occur. Councillors received the document on the 15th of June, and there was no time scheduled for the briefing to discuss this document, to overview or come to a consensus on what could be included and what should not. That is a poor process, and this strategy should not be determined tonight. If it is council putting themselves in the position of rubber stamping and not genuine participants in making the plan better, making the measurements tighter, basically failing the governance oversight that they should have. I do point out, I'm not blaming, the administration for what has occurred. Everyone is operating in a completely foreign environment of working from home. These things clearly happen from time to time. The onus is on the councillors to apply a level of scrutiny to the document that demonstrates we are doing more than paying mere lip service to our role. So the point isn't that I think there are inherent flaws in the document. I have some weaknesses and inconsistencies that as councillors have failed in their role to make a good plan better. So what am I talking about? Appendix A, a whole of council approach is specified. An approach to economic development, a whole of council, action 4, support the growth of a nighttime economy. A nighttime economy is undefined. What does a nighttime economy mean? How is that consistent with the structure plans that is currently out for consultation about greater residential densities and living in the Diamond Creek and Eltham activity centres? How do we integrate and square that circle? That is what we need to be discussing. I have some suggestions around some other areas, but I think my point is made.
Thank you, Councillor Brooker. Any other councillors wish to speak? No? If not, we'll put it to the vote. Yeah. Councillor Clark, you have right of reply.
Thank you. Well, I think the last comment sort of said it all. We want to square, what was it? We want to square the circle. I haven't seen a lot of square circles, Councillor Brooker, but I think that's sort of the confused commentary that you provided. I don't think you can start to take credit for you're the only one that made a contribution. Other councillors, and I'm not going to go through naming them, but I know other councillors have spent a lot of hours and a lot of time with officers on this report. And a number of us actually think they've done good work. It's very clear to me what a nighttime economy is. It's talking about what happens in restaurants, in the pubs and clubs that occur in the Shire, about any other retail that may occur late. It's about arts policies that may occur in the Shire. It's about evening activity, which will generate economic activity. And there are a number of those that can grow in that space, whether you're at Montsalvat or whether you're at the local restaurant. So the document sets out a framework. I think we'd all agree you can keep working on this document forever and a day. I'd encourage an annual review of this and its success by future councils, and then people continue to grow the document. But what it is, as I said at the outset, is a good base for us to work. It's a considered document with some research that sat behind it. Yes, there was a flaw in a photocopying exercise that didn't work for 1 week. That was remedied in about 48 hours. It's not the end of the world. So I have no problems in adopting this. And as I said, let's keep going with the good work some of our officers are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. We need to put it to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendation? All those, sorry, do that again. All those in favour? All those against? And that is carried.
Did Councillor Perkins vote there? I didn't see his hand go
Just
up.
for a moment, councillors.
There it is. Didn't you see it?
Sorry, can we do that again? Because I didn't see Councillor Perkins put up his hand in either section. Can we start again? All those in favour? I need to see your hand. That's it. And all those against? Thank you, and that is carried. Our next item on the agenda is 09620, Temporary and Community Advertising Signage Policy. Can I have a mover for the motion, please?
Councillor, the Mayor, I've got an alternate resolution to the one which is on the paper, and I've circulated that to officers. I've sent that to officers and I've emailed it to councillors. Thank you. So it is, I'll just be able to read it myself, that the adoption of this policy deferred pending a further review and consultation with the groups running events in the Shire to ensure it continues to facilitate community events, and that a councillor reference group to be appointed to assess this process.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Can I have a seconder for your motion, please? Or do I have a seconder? Councillor Perkins. Over to you, Councillor Clark.
Look, councillors, I reread this document a number of times. I certainly raised a range of issues at the last time we had briefings on it. And I remain concerned that it doesn't, that it, whilst that it seeks to reduce the number of signs that are out there, it does so in such a way that is not necessarily conducive to those groups that are already running significant events in our Shire, or even smaller community groups who want to run some one-off type activities, whether they be carols by candlelight in the local street leading up to Christmas. So when they put some advertising signs out to let people know what's going on, that would be illegal under this sort of process. And that, well, when I say illegal, they could apply for sites, but it may not suit where they're actually going to do their event. Indeed, in my view, from what I've observed of the various larger Rotary major event festivals for the town fairs, both at Eltham and Diamond Creek, their banners certainly wouldn't fit the criteria either in location or size, because this requires a one size fits all of your banners. Your sign's got to be a one-off size of, I think it's 800 by 1200, and that's it. Now, we do need to work with a range of these community groups to ensure that we've got appropriate outcomes. We don't want scattered signs everywhere willy-nilly, but we do want to ensure that at the end of the day that we've brought the community with us in this particular process, not put out a document. There are a bunch of sporting groups who go, look, there are some occasional signs I need to put up to be able to encourage people to play netball or basketball or soccer or whatever else, because, you know, this is the 2 weeks when we're taking on new membership. Again, some of those would be near a sporting ground. Sometimes they're not. And we just need to have worked this through. From all of those groups that are doing things where we've got submissions from them, I've not found any of them when I've read those submissions that go, thank God this policy, it's really going to help us as a group to do something. There are others submissions, and quite a number of them, who would not like to see a sign at all, anywhere, under any circumstance. I certainly don't agree with that proposition. Equally, even the banner signs that are about to go up in Eltham almost prohibit the nature of putting signs up there that actually assist the traders, which I would have thought would be one of the principal things we might do. And we did even talk the other week about using some of those banner signs for special days, whether it be Reconciliation Week or whatever else. This document currently prohibits that. So I think there's more work to be done, and we need to work with the various community groups that are putting the events on and go, how's this going to work, whether you're a wattle festival or whatever else. I mean, even at the edges, there are some things, you know, we came across an event earlier this year, which was to support a foundation by a particular group in the Shire, which we would want to have supported, but it was actually going to happen on the edges of our municipality in Banyule, and this policy would preclude us from putting up signs to support and let the community know that was on. So, look, we've got to get something which is in tune with the community to run events. Equally, we don't want to have a plethora of signs. I think one of the advantages out of this is it has identified the massive number of signs that sit along the main roads put up by Vic Roads that we need to try and reduce, and that's a good sort of outcome of this, which we would want to consider. But I think if we do just defer it, work with the officers and with those community groups, I'm sure we'll get a better outcome. And I'd hope we'll do that and bring it back in July and get this thing moving. I'm certainly very keen to see, and I'd hope this won't delay putting up some banner poles. I understand we've got some banners to go up, at least just say Nillumbik on the poles we've already put up in Eltham. I'd hope we'd be able to get on with do that in the short term. So it looks a bit silly. We've got the polls and the residents are, sorry, the traders are simply saying, well, why don't you put up something that simply says shop local? In COVID-19, anything we can do to help those traders, we should be doing tomorrow. So a little bit of time, hopefully only another 2 or 3 weeks, we'll get this right and bring it back and get on with it.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Perkins.
Yeah, look, I've had some concerns with this document for quite a while, and some of the changes have been made. You know, as councillors will know and officers will know, that the council event signage where we promote, you know, tying a core flute to a township sign, I've said right the way along that, you know, I can't see how that meets with Vic Road's requirements. I don't think it's appropriate that stay in. It's good that the document's deleted all reference to what officers thought were the Nillumbik-owned flagpoles in Diamond Creek for the banner poles, where they're in fact not owned by Nillumbik. They're owned by the Diamond Creek Traders Association. I suppose just on the banner poles, I would sort of say that although the banner poles aren't owned by council, I think it would be appropriate if council commissioned you know, shop local flags in Eltham, that they should also commission flags to say the same thing in Diamond Creek if the permission of the Diamond Creek Traders Association is sought and granted. So I've had the organiser of the Diamond Creek Community Carols that is held in Wadeson Reserve each year. He's contacted me with some concerns that they don't appear to be able to put a sign up in the park like they have historically for many years, and they're concerned about how do they get, you know, a small community group that is fundamentally ad hoc. How do they get $10 million worth of public liability insurance? So, you know, this temporary community and advertising signage policy is not new. It's been worked on for most of the time I've been on council. I think I remember it starting to be worked on about 2011. It broadly came about, you know, trying to prohibit the type of signs that we see from Rotary and RSL, and it's actually the groups I think that will have the greatest issue with this policy. I think it is a hand grenade ready to go off, and if we can do some more work to work with those and other community groups that seek to advertise, you know, the community events, you know, on behalf of all of us, that can be only a good thing. But the sort of one size fits all that we're going to make everyone have the same size, you know, same sign in the same location, I don't think it will have much of an impact in terms of trying to do what the community groups want it to do. They want to advertise their events, you know, not just put up a bland sign that fits all the Nillumbik corporate parameters. So yeah, look, I'd certainly support the motion put by Councillor Clark to take this away, do some more work with community, and hopefully bring it back in something that might work, because I'm not sure this will.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. Any other councillors wish to speak on this topic? Councillor Brooker, please unmute yourself.
Thank you. Look, I just focus my remarks on the banner program, because certainly I support the motion of going out and talking about it a bit more, because there's certainly going to need some more conversations, because right now this is a temporary and community advertising policy. That's, you know, advertising community events. And what Councillor Clark has alluded to is the traders in Eltham using those banners for purposes of promotion. So there's certainly a difference in view as to what, you know, people define as community advertising and what his intention is for these flagpoles to be used for. Because he's right, in the guidelines for the policy, you wouldn't be able to use them in the manner that he has suggested you do, which is put up a local banner saying shop local. That wouldn't be permitted. So I think certainly there's going to be some conversations around how the banner programs work. And I do think when you talk about squaring the circle, how do you make that work? how do you make two opposites sort of come around? That is going to be the challenge of the group that looks at community advertising. And they'll have to look at it in a very much broader way than what I guess the thrust of the document is. So it'll be intriguing to see how that all plays out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooker. Any other councillors wish to speak? If not, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? And that is unanimous and carried. Thank you, councillors. Our next item is 09720, the Shire Plan 2040 towards a community vision for Nillumbik. Do I have a mover for the motion? Councillor Clark.
Yes, Mayor, I'm back in vogue. Look, I move the resolution in accordance with the papers.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Rankin.
When were you not in vogue?
Oh, it's from time
Over to you, Councillor Clark.
You've never lost it.
Councillor Clark, councillors, please get on with the item, both of you. Refrain.
And I like Councillor Perkins' Liberal tie too.
Come on.
So can I just say, look, this is actually quite an important document looking at the vision for Nillumbik going forward. Again, it sets a framework which, once it goes out finally for public consultation and becomes the basis of a document for a new council to move forward with, it is, as I said, a basis for doing that. There are many people who will have their view of what the vision for the Shire should be over the next 20 years as we move towards 2040. Hopefully it's a vision excluding COVID-19 and a vision where we as a community can come together far more in a one-on-one situation. Certainly, I think when we're writing this, we hadn't anticipated it in the context of a pandemic. I encourage members of the community to read what this is about. I actually see this as a very important community conversation. I think we still have got within this document the intrinsic components as to why people reside in the Shire, why they love our local community, about community engagement, about the green wedge, about the trees, about the beautiful hilly rolling hills, the rural environment, the opportunities there are for sport. I mean, as I think I said when we started off at day one as a council, our task is to try and ensure that we are the world's most livable Shire. We still aspire to that. Hopefully this document is heading in that direction, and I'm sure that is an outcome, whatever nuances people will have across our community that they also aspire to. And so as we set up the framework for the next 20 years, we've got a starting point here and encourage the community to participate in that. The next council will pick this up in a more significant document, and as all councils will be required to do after they're being re-elected, and the state government will require each council to have a document around this sort of framework going forward. So we've started the work, commend the officers for their support, and look forward to the community response further.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Rankin.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's just another opportunity that provides to our community that they can certainly get involved as little or as much as they like. But I think, as Councillor Clark's highlighted, that it's a good stepping stone for the next council, and I think it'll certainly help the community and council moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rankin. Councillors? Any others wish to speak? Councillor Brooker.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, this is a good start to a document that needs to be delivered by July 31st, 2021, which isn't all that far away. I always think it's helpful to reverse engineer this process. What was Nillumbik like in the year 2000? Unfortunately, most of us are old enough to remember what life was like in the year 2000, and how things have changed in the intervening period is somewhat useful, I think, to think about. Certainly, and I remember, climate was a big issue, but the big word on everyone's lips was Kyoto rather than the latest Paris seems to be it more lately. Land usage was an issue, all these things. But Nillumbik introduced the 3-bin system in the early 2000s that we still use today. So they're very much an early adopter, and we've tweaked that policy in this next financial year. So just to say, a community vision, a Shire plan, a vision is one thing. Having policies that deliver that vision is something quite different. So to that council that pushed Nillumbik in the early 2000s to be the leading council in Victoria in diversion from landfill, I think congratulations to them. It must have been, and I think it continued for many years, some pushback on that system. And there's some political opposition, I'm sure, to that behaviour change that, the council prodded people to adopt. But right now, the vision you might have had of a more sustainable neighbourhood, city and planet was made real, tangible and lasting through a council policy. That is the standard I think we need to have to aspire to for ourselves with this document. The challenge is to be as brave politically as that council was back in the early 2000s, and to exercise such fundamentally sound judgment. I have to say, after our budget decision tonight, I'm not all that optimistic about that, but we've got another opportunity to get it right, and this is maybe an opportunity to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooker. Councillor Perkins, did I see your hand up raised before?
Look, I'm not going to oppose the adoption of this motion, but we've got to see it for what it is, and it's largely an internal document. It hasn't gone out for community consultation. I have a strong belief that if and when it does, there'll be some feedback that talks about neighbourhood character and really in terms of what the people in the ward that I represent want to see the future of Diamond Creek look like. They don't want to see neighbourhood character destroyed. They want to see a council that supports retaining, the rural charm of Diamond Creek and perhaps even improving that. I'm sure it could be improved. They want to see building heights limited wherever possible. They don't want to see a Doncaster or a Rexfield. These are the sort of things that people don't want to see. They want to see some improvements to the traffic network. They want to see road and public transport improved without necessarily having a large increase in the built form or a large increase in population density. They'd like to see basically low density living, and the vision of the future, really, in terms of, if you ask most people, isn't that different from where we are right now, aside from having the services that should accommodate the current population. So really, without having to go to a massive increase in population, let's close the gap on the provision of services and community buildings, and road infrastructure and drains and all those things that council should be doing. Roads, rates and rubbish, that say concentrate on that in terms of your visioning process. But they're sort of my thoughts in terms of what people say to me about what they'd like to see their neighbourhood look like. They want council to have a key role in protecting that neighbourhood and advocating very hard not to open it up to wide scale development. That's the way I think community would react to this document. But when we get to the next stage on the new council, if some of the councillors here will join me, we'll continue this program moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. Any other councillors wish to speak? If not, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? And yes, I saw everybody's hands, I think. You really have to I have to get this right. Thank you. It's unanimous. It's part of our new local government laws. Our next report tonight is 09820, the Regional Gallery Business Case and Master Plan. Do I have a mover for the motion, please? Councillor Clark. Councillor Clark, over to you. You need to be unmuted. Can you unmute yourself, Councillor Clark? Thank you.
When the screen goes up with the words on it, it's very hard to unmute yourself.
Right.
Equally, what I was saying was I was waiting to see who the seconder was.
Councillor Perkins.
Thank you. Look, Mayor, what this does is recognise advice that we've been given, or our staff has been given, by some bureaucrats, I think in DHHS, is that this is one of the preferred, if not the preferred site. Certainly the advice I've been given was it is the preferred site for the community hospital. What we don't know is the business case of the community hospital, exactly how much it will occupy or whatever else. We had been targeting a regional gallery on the old Shire office site. And so what this does is basically says until we understand exactly what the state government's position is with respect to that, we will put on hold the nature of a further feasibility work on the master plan for the regional gallery. I do this reluctantly, I've got to say. I actually think a regional gallery on this site would be a massive positive for our local community in this location. Nonetheless, as part of our activity centre strategy and our other strategies and just the economic development strategy earlier on tonight indicate, we are very keen to see a major attractor of an employment at this particular location. And so should the government decide to bring that here, that may have that particular effect. We would clearly need to safeguard the planning issues that sit around that. But in the conversations that I've had with senior bureaucrats in government and at the Austin Hospital who auspice this project, I'm told that they're still very much working up their business case. This was an election commitment, so there was no sort of theory that sat behind why we need a hospital here in the first place. It's just an idea of someone who thought it was a good election announcement, and so they're now trying to work up a business case for why or what that might be and fund it. Again, there's no funding allocated yet to purchase any sites or even to develop it, which I understand they need about another 750 out of the state government to do it. Currently, there's only money to do the research on the site. So hopefully, and I know the bureaucrats are hoping that this year's state budget will show money to buy sites and start to progress this project, and that will enable us to understand more what's going to happen from the state's perspective. We know they're still trying to find somewhere to put 100 cars and 200 from the federal government. Again, could occur in this particular precinct. So there's a bit of work to be done. So probably good to not spend more money on something that may not occur here. That doesn't for a minute seem, it should indicate for some of us at least that we're going to walk away from regional gallery. We think it is a good idea for a Shire that needs to do that. The question is how it's funded and what you do. We have been exceptionally successful over our journey, which Councillor Rankin indicated, on getting grants out of other levels of government. When we came to office, even the North East Link hadn't been started, and something that we argued for. We've certainly seen a massive increase of grants that have come to this council via the support of the state and federal governments. You know, 5 million for congestion busting from Fitzsimmons Lane, 200 cars from the federal government. You know, we got about a whole bunch of more money to help around schools and things. You know, there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to argue a case to fund a regional gallery with the support of the state and federal government. So it won't be a project that we do alone, but I think important to the context of the area, and I reluctantly delay this, and so we use our money wisely.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Perkins.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to enthusiastically put the Regional Art Gallery feasibility study and all the money associated with it, all the work, you know, put it on ice for the moment. Like, I'm not sure that it's ever going to happen to the extent that it's proposed. You know, $50 million for a regional art gallery in Eltham. I think we've got some other more pressing matters that need to be dealt with. You know, Eltham does okay. If they get the state government building a community hospital, that's a fantastic result. That resolves that whole issue for council and for community, I would have thought. So this is a very good motion. I think if council tried to put an art gallery on that site, I think it would put the Guggenheim to shame in terms of its cost. I think it would end up costing a lot more than 50 million. And the consultation would go round and round in circles for many years. Probably nothing would get built, and it would just be the reason for successive councils to be thrown out of office, and no good would come of it. So I'm enthusiastically supporting the community hospital on that site. That resolves that site, and we won't have to pay the $1.5 million to operate a regional art gallery, and that would be the end of that. So great motion, very supportive.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Jemerick.
We seem to have some misconceptions, which is continually being put out into the public, that this site is the preferred site of the state government or the Austin Hospital. It is one site. There's also a misconception that it is the Eltham Hospital. It is the electoral area of Eltham, so that includes Greensborough, it includes Diamond Creek, and of course Eltham. So they're looking much wider. Also, there's reference here to the IOU for $5 million from the state and federal governments to do with congestion busting, and the inference that we would build a car park on this site. And again, I don't think that is great use of an asset which is owned by the community. There is nothing wrong with having space available in your community for when you have the right project. At this stage, we don't have the right project. We have no indication from anyone that it is the right place for a project. And if someone does have this, I would be happy for him to put it in writing and show us, because there is nothing. But we keep putting these little thought bubbles out, and it seems to be a Donald Trump-like activity of, if you say it often enough, people will sort of say, oh, the car park's going there, or the hospital's going there, and just assume that it's lost. At this stage, it's owned by the people of Nillumbik. And it will be put to good use when the time is right. So let's stop trying to clutter it up with car parks or imaginary hospitals, and have a high quality community facility that the community can be proud of into the future.
Thank you,
Open
Councillor.
space is not a problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jemerick. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Brooker.
Mayor, I just wish to ask a question, if I could, of the officers, just to pick up Councillor Jemerick's point.
Certainly. What's your question, and to whom?
I think it's probably to the Director of Planning, because I understand that's where the advice came from. I'm just trying to clarify, because it is central to what we're debating tonight. And as I understand...
I'll get her. She's just coming up now. Okay, go ahead.
So I wonder whether Rosa might just confirm that I've got this right, that the DHS department have met with our strategic planning staff, and as a consequence of those conversations, they were made aware that this is the preferred site for a proposed community hospital, and we're seeking, as I understand it, support or confirmation from the Minister to be able to make announcements, and as a consequence of that, we've got the report before us tonight. So my question is that correct? It was my understanding, reading of the emails that were sent to us, that's where we're up to.
Thank you. Sorry, Rosa, we've got an audio problem again. No, can you just go do what you did before? Try again. No, try again.
Hello?
We can hear you now. Yep, fire away.
through the Mayor, the Strategic Planning Department has spoken with officers of the department, and they have clarified that this is the preferred site for that community use.
Thank you, Rosa. Any other questions, Councillor Clark? Councillor Demerit.
I was only trying to clarify exactly why we're actually even discussing it tonight. No one brought it up other than the officers made it clear to us, and that's why we've got the report before us.
All right, so if we can get back to the issue at hand.
Sorry.
Councillor Demerit.
Through the chair. So we have it in writing that this is the preferred site.
Rosa?
No, unfortunately, we don't have it in writing. There are only verbal conversations that have been had.
Yes, so.
Thank you, Councillor Demerit. Back to the issue at hand, the Regional Gallery business case. Any other councillors wish to speak? I think we're up to Councillor Brooker. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I've made my views clear on this issue previously. There are only two things standing between Nillumbik Council and the $49 million art gallery located on that site that would provide any number of extraordinary benefits to our community. And that is really confirmation that that's going to be the site of the gallery and $49 million. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooker. Any other councillors wish to speak? If not, we'll put that to the vote.
I just understand, was Councillor Brooke speaking against the resolution or for it?
For it, I made the point there's only one thing standing in between the art gallery and it being built, and that's the $49 million. So
two.
I'm certainly in favour of that.
I think that's two,
Yes.
Ding, in your words.
Thank you, councillors. We'll put it to the vote. All those in favour of putting this on ice? And that is carried. Thank you, councillors. Our next item is the Hurstbridge Men's Shed Issues and Options paper. Can I have a mover for the motion? Councillor Ashton. As per the papers? Thank you, Councillor Ashton.
Yes, as per the papers, endorse site 2. Oh, sorry, I can read it from here.
Okay. Do you want me to read it or you?
No, it's okay, I've got it here. Endorse site 2 as a potential location for the future Hurstbridge Men's Shed, pending further site investigations and feedback from Melbourne Water. Endorses office to commence community engagement, conducting further targeted conversations with community, the precinct users, in brackets, in partnership with Hurstbridge Men's Shed.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. And do I have a seconder for the motion, please? Councillor Clark. Back to you, Councillor Ashton.
Thank you. Look, I fully support this recommendation. As we're probably all aware, men's sheds are recognised for their contribution to men's health. They provide a positive and supportive environment. And I think most of us as councillors have attended or been invited to men's sheds for breakfast or meetings or been there for open days, and we've all seen the supportive environment that they offer, and also the range and diversity of people that they attract. With the Hurstbridge group, there is a definite need for a fit-for-purpose men's shed, and that's been known for a while. The Hurstbridge Men's Shed has existed for about 11 years. Its membership continues to grow, and its current location isn't suitable. It needs to be near a railway station and public transport, and also because of the type of equipment and work that goes on in the men's shed, a site that's away from other users is preferable. So this site, it's at the back of Elwood House, near the old Pony Club grounds in Hurstbridge on the Arthurs Creek Road. It's recommended as the preferred site. However, this decision wasn't taken lightly, and there were 12 other sites investigated. So officers have done a good job, and councillors working with them to find this site. Supporting this recommendation enables officers to then commence further community engagement in partnership with the Hurstbridge Men's Shed and I assume the wider Hurstbridge District area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. Councillor Clark.
Happy to support this, Mayor. I think this fits into the categories because, you know, if you looked at this a month ago, this was a lot of some councils asking, well, why are we doing this? Mine, like a lot of things, is, well, why not? You know, in the words of Councillor Brooker, there's only one thing stopping it. That is, in this case, about $400,000, and the second one is an agreement on the site. Well, we're getting to the agreement on the site. We're going to put together the funding and we'll bring these things to reality. If you're going to be on a council, you need to have a vision. The vision from some of the councillors, like the Mayor and like Councillor Ashton, is to support the groups like Men's Shed, who thought they were never going to get anywhere with this. This wasn't a project on our agenda when we started. This wasn't going to get anywhere. They haven't got any money. It's all too hard. Just like when we started with North East Link, no one's going to fund a $10 billion major road, which helps our congestion. No one's going to fund a gallery and help us to do things in the community. Some of us have a vision. Some of it, the vision is not massive, expensive projects, but they're community assets such as this. And Councillor Ashton and Councillor Egan have fought for this project for their Shire, and I look forward to seeing it brought to fruition. We've now identified a site, which they were struggling about a month or so to go. It's essentially with the CEO and the Mayor and Councillor Ashton getting in a car and working out, doing the hard yards and working it out, meeting with the Men's Shed, doing the hard yards. And now we'll work out how we're going to be able to fund this. This will be a great attribute to people that have got some with issues that need support. I'm sure it will grow like the Eltham Men's Shed has, like the Darman Creek Men's Shed has. From small beginnings, these things grow, and they need the support of councillors like us to deliver on the vision. I noticed for my excitement that the clock is stuck, but I'll stop there. No, it's back again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Perkins.
I mean, in spite of the fact that Councillor Clark didn't see his way to stroking my ego, I'll do it myself. And I'm an enthusiastic supporter of this project, as I have been for the first Men's Shed that Nillumbik sought, which was in Diamond Creek. And Diamond Creek, you know, we utilised an existing building, and then the Men's Shed grew from that and built a purpose-built shed. The only thing I would add to this project, I would sort of say, I would want to see the plans and the concept drawings. I'd want to be sure that we're not just building a shed where we put machinery in, because the report seems to talk about not using some buildings on the basis of, you know, wooden floors, fire risk, all the rest of it. I see a Men's Shed as a community meeting place, you know, for men. Some of them will want to use machinery or equipment. Some of them will just want to have a cup of tea and have a chat. That part of the Men's Shed movement is as important, if not more important, than, you know, the physical task of you know, people getting together and building things. You know, in some areas, a Men's Shed is just carpenters. In some places, a Men's Shed might be just metal workers. In Nillumbik, a Men's Shed, it has been people, you know, that might have some hands-on skills, that might not. It doesn't really matter. So I just sort of look at the report, and I would think if we're going to build a purpose-built shed, it either has to have areas inside it that you know, it's got a kitchen and people can have lunch and meet there, or else we can use an existing building for that purpose. And I just look at the historical milking sheds, and perhaps there might be an arrangement where the historical milking sheds could be used by the Men's Shed group, you know, for those lunches and those meeting occasions. Still build the shed for the equipment, but you know, the other two Men's Sheds, or three Men's Sheds in Nillumbik, they've got their workspace and they've got their meeting space. Now, St Andrews has got their adjoining the Wanumbuck, so they've got the community meeting space. So has the one at Eltham North, and so has the one at Diamond Creek. They've all got separate buildings where they can actually leave the shed, the work area, and go and have lunch and sit down and have a coffee and chat. So that's, you know, if I'm lucky enough to be returned again for a third time, I think it is. Yeah, at least 3 times. If I can get into my 11th year on council, I'll certainly be following this process diligently, and I'll be hoping that the and trying to achieve that the Hurstbridge Men's Shed gets the very best they can in terms of having that function. It's not just about building a tin shed. It's about building a place where people can go and have a chat and meet. And Men's Shed is more about men's health and mental health than it is about building things. And that's really been the key to it in Nillumbik. And I'll be keen to make sure that we're not just limiting ourselves to building a shed. Thank you.
Totally agree with everything you've said, Councillor Perkins. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Demerit.
I'm sure the people of Hurstbridge Men's Shed are very disappointed that they're not represented by Councillor Clark in that he was able to secure $10 billion for a project, and Councillor Egan and Councillor Ashton are only able to get 300,000 or something for a project such as this.
I'm sure they're happy with their representation. The two ladies are doing a great job.
Thank you. Councillor Demerit.
Rudely interrupted again, but men's sheds are a great thing. We've seen a number of cases where men's sheds have pulled themselves up by the bootstraps. I look at the local men's shed here in Eltham. Just basically forced council to find a property for them, and currently sitting at 140 members. We've seen that if facilities are built, they will grow. Some of them have forced it, and some need a little bit more help to get it going. So fully support it, and I'm sure once we get good facilities, the people running it will attract many members, and it'll bring great benefit to the community. So fully supportive of it.
Thank you, Councillor Demerit. Councillor Booker.
Thank you. I'll just question through the chair. Councillor Ashton mentioned that the membership continues to grow at Hurstbridge Men's Shed. I'm not sure if the manager for community services is around, but
Just a moment, and I will get her on board. Won't be a moment, Councillor Booker. There we go. Fire away, Councillor Booker.
Yeah, I'm just something that Councillor Ashton said that seems to be at odds with what I was told recently. The membership of the Hurstbridge Men's Shed continues to grow. I was informed of the opposite. Could you inform us what's correct?
Yes, Councillor Booker, through the chair. The membership of the Men's Shed is wanting to grow. They have a waiting list. The only reason they have been unable to grow their numbers is because of the constraints of the size of their current shed. It's at bursting seams, as it would be, say, at the moment.
Does that help, Councillor Booker?
Yeah, not really. So are their numbers growing or not?
At the moment, they've got a waiting list. They can't grow their numbers due to the constraints of the size of the current shed. But with a larger facility, we have every confidence that those numbers will grow.
Unmute yourself, yeah. Councillor Booker. Yeah. Is that all you wanted to say, Councillor Booker? You keep talking when you mute yourself.
Councillor Demerit has a question, I think.
Councillor, I was going back to him, but I couldn't understand what you were saying. Councillor Demerit.
We were told in briefings that they had a membership of 10 and it's gone back to 8. Is that not correct?
The reason that it has gone back to 8 is one of them is unwell, not that he doesn't wish to participate or is, unwilling to participate. It's due to health reasons. Some of these men have ongoing health issues as well as mental health issues. So there will be a fluctuation with those numbers like any smaller group.
Has every councillor had an opportunity to speak? I think so. Councillor Booker.
Thank you. Look, this does make me think, what would you do if it happened to you? I understand the ward councillor wanting to assist this group. I actually think all residents do, and I do. But I think I go down a different path, and it's more the path that Councillor Perkins alluded to. that we don't necessarily have to have a shed to support this group. What we do need to do is have something better than what they currently have. Council have undertaken in this paper, as this paper attests, an exhaustive examination of sites within Hurstbridge and have concluded that the best site, the best fit for a men's shed after that search is one that has no electricity, no mains water, no sewerage, requires fencing, has difficult topography, which would likely mean increased construction costs, has various planning issues, including possibly a heritage management plan and variations for car parking. We do have $30,000 to conduct the various investigations required. What we don't know is what funding formula can be progressed to come up with the $250,000 to $400,000 that is necessary to construct a shed for this group. Preliminary answers are that maybe half will come from here, possibly half from there, maybe funded from the community more broadly, but most significantly funded from council. So I'm not so much a visionary as I try to be a realist. What I try and say is I think the proposition is best summarised in dot point 12 of the report. Community development is a process where council provides a hand up to any organically generated kind of grassroots group to fulfill their purposes and objectives. A hand up is different to being carried. Dot point 12 talks about the Hurstbridge Men's Shed sourcing fundraising, sponsorship and grant applications. There is no evidence that has been presented to us that demonstrates this capacity. There's no evidence presented to us that demonstrates the governance structures that support such an approach. I think in the interim, what I would like to see is the Hurstbridge Men's Shed use the community transport that we do have available. We do have 1.5 days at the St Andrews shed that is available that could be allocated to them. That would have to be worked through, but I think that is a better fit for them now for the legitimate aspirations they have. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just clarify, Councillor Brooke, are you against the motion?
Yes, I am.
Right of reply, Councillor Ashton. Oh, sorry, Councillor Rankin hasn't spoken.
Thank you, Mayor. I absolutely support this motion. I think the two ward councillors have done an immaculate job in getting it to where it is. I think the men's shed is, and it doesn't matter whether it's the one at St Andrews, Diamond Creek or Eltham or wherever. It's a hugely supportive group, and I think that once these gentlemen get this or get a facility that is fit for purpose, I think we will see those numbers grow. There is a massive amount of mental health within men, not just men but also women. But I think the men's shed in a rural setting such as Hurstbridge, we will find more potential members come out once we provide them with a stable facility. I'm absolutely supportive of this and recommend it.
Thank you, Councillor Rankin. Back to you, Councillor Ashton, for right of reply.
Councillor Brooker, you're the Chair of Community Services. The most vulnerable, those need council to help them. I absolutely agree. We empower community, but there are some groups and some organisations that we need to do more than just that. We talked earlier about sporting clubs. We talked about the equine community. We talked about football and netball and things like that. Those people have an incredible capacity to fundraise and to drive council and to do things. Men's sheds are more vulnerable than that. And, now they might have 10 on their waiting list. We don't know. But what we do for previous men sheds that council supported is build it and they will come. I've always wanted to say that. So we can't arrange a minibus to pick people up and have them go and visit St Andrews. That's not quite how this works. This depends on trains, and it depends on people locally being there to make a cup of tea, welcome somebody, and have some projects. The other beautiful thing about this site is Aralern are also based there, and Elwood House is also based there. There's a lot of synergies between what's happening on that site and the potential men shed. Older men go there and can mentor younger men, and that's what we've found in a lot of the sheds that exist at the moment. You know, Councillor Perkins, you know, he's right. It's not all about building things. It's more to do with the social contacts, and with men, it's about having an excuse to go somewhere and do something. Women are very good at that. Men find it a little bit harder. So if they've got a reason to go somewhere because they're building I'm sitting here next to my filing tray that was purchased from the Bestbridge men's shed. You know, so I cannot believe that you are serious about putting them on a minibus. Okay, thank you.
Time, Councillor Ashton, unfortunately. We still need to vote. All those in favour of the motion? And that all those against? And that is carried. Thank you, councillors. Our next item up is 100/20, the Audit and Risk Committee matters. Can I have a mover for the motion, Councillor Rankin?
Happy to move it, Mayor. However, just like to confirm with governance that as in item 3, that it reappoints Councillor Clark and myself pro turn, that I am allowed to actually move the item, please, governance.
There was also a couple of words to be added to item 4. There we are, that's it. And I've had confirmation from governance that there's no issue in just swapping the words around to read.
Can you also just please confirm with governance that even though we don't have any procural interest in it, that I am allowed to actually move the item?
That is correct. Confirmed.
Thank you, Mayor.
And a seconder for the motion, please.
Seconded, Mayor. Seconded.
Back to you, Councillor Rankin.
Mayor, look, I suppose there's a couple of things here to highlight. That the reappointment of the independent committee members, they're doing a fantastic job, but it's also important to highlight the remuneration as well for the independent members. The independent members, to be able to attract the quality and the calibre of these individuals, and to ensure that the governance and the audit and the finance of the organisation is kept in line, we need to be able to pay them accordingly. We're still below other councils, but we're way below it, in fact, for a number of them. But I think it sets a good standard. You've seen over the last term, we've had some good comments coming back from the Audit and Risk Committee. The external auditors have commented numerous times as well, and I'm supportive of the motion. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you, Councillor Rankin. Over to you, Councillor Clark.
I've nothing more to add.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Demery?
I find it a damning indictment on Councillor Clark and Councillor Rankin that we have to pay people an extra $1,000 a year to sit around with them. But outside of that, I have no other comments.
Can I suggest you might withdraw that? It's a pathetic comment at the least. I mean, I don't even know what he's supposed to mean by it, but, you know, seriously, maybe this is getting a bit too late.
We'll move on. Any other councillors wish to speak?
So just to clarify, Mayor, is Councillor Dimerick, for or against the motion?
Councillor Dimerick, are you for or against the motion?
For.
Thank you, Councillor Dimerick. Any other councillors wish to speak? If not, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? And that is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Our next item is 101-20, the View Hill Crescent Special Charge Scheme questionnaire results. Can I have a move of the motion? Councillor Clark.
Moved, Mayor.
As per the papers.
As per the
I have a
papers.
seconder, please. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Rankin. Councillor Clark.
Mayor, to be frank, I find this is unfortunate. I've been successful in working with residents who've worked very hard on getting Fordham's Road up and Rockcliffe Road during the course of this term thus far. We've worked very hard at View Hill Crescent. The reason why I'm saddened about this for View Hill Crescent, there are a number of people with health issues on View Hill Crescent Road who, as a consequence of the dust and other circumstances and drainage that are impacted by this, will have a continuing hard life as a consequence. There are also residents somewhere around about from numbers 5 through to about 13, 14, who bear the brunt of the drainage of a lot of this road, to the point where some of them can't even get insurance on their houses anymore because it's been flooded so many times. So in conjunction with officers, we've worked very hard to try and see whether we can find ways, whether we do this scheme in sections or whatever other ways to help the residents. We got one section up to about 57%, I think, but still not quite enough to get the numbers. So I feel for the residents in this circumstance and encourage other residents to, frankly, have a good hard look at themselves and understand why they wouldn't support some of their colleagues that are in really dire straits. There's no way out for them. The only other way out for them is for the council to make the road, and that's not our policy to do. So it is a very difficult situation where they sit in broadly an urban environment. You know, you can run the hard lines of, oh, well, you bought here in the first place, you sort of knew what you were getting yourselves into. But, you know, I do feel for those residents who are doing it tough as a consequence of these circumstances, particularly with climate change, where you have got far greater deluges of rain in certain circumstances. Some of this drainage has not been designed to cope with it. They're copying the balance. We do work with maintenance of the council to try and help to the extent that we can. We've got signs up to stop dust hazards and on all the rest of it. But not much more we can do here, I'm afraid. And I'd encourage the residents to have another shot in 3 years and they might get there.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Rankin. Any other councillors wish to speak? We'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? And that is unanimous and carried. Thank you. Our next item is 102-20, Assembly of Councillors. Can I have a mover? Councillor Rankin. As per the paper. And can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Ashton. Councillor Rankin.
Thank you, Mayor. Just more a formality. Nothing more to comment. No.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak? If not, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. Just one minute. I've lost Councillor Clark. That's okay. We'll move on to the next. He's come back. Thank you. You're on mute, Councillor Clark.
I lost my video and lost my voice, but anyway, I'm back.
Mayor, can I make a recommendation that we bundle the next ones together?
With pleasure. Are you moving them as a lot?
Happy to move them as a block, Mayor.
Thank you. And can I have a seconder, please?
Seconded.
Senator Councillor, I'll just go through them. The first one's 103-20, a tender report for retail fuel cards via procurement. 105, tender report contract 1920-88, small tariff sites electricity. And the last one is
No, you can't.
I've missed one. 104, the tender report for contract 1920-87, large site and street lighting electricity. Do you wish to speak to the?
No, just happy to move them, Mayor.
Thank you. And the seconder was Councillor Ashton, wasn't it? Or Councillor Clark? Councillor Clark. All those in favour? And that is carried. We now have a couple of notices of motion. The first one is 00520, protections for illegal tree clearing in urban areas. Do I have a mover? Councillor Clark. Could you unmute yourself, Councillor Clark, please?
Sorry, can I have leave of council to add a couple of words in on under item 4 to request, and I can put in the words here, local members.
Before you do, I need someone to move that to give you leave to do that. So can I have
Exactly what I was doing, was seeking leave to do that.
Councillor Rankin moved and seconded. Councillor Demerit. Councillor Clark.
Mayor, I just want to add in the words after the word request to the words local members Vicky Ward, Danielle Green and Sean McLean, who's the upper house member.
Yeah.
Plus the MIMAV, so then the words plus that. And
All right, before we go any further, can we vote on that, please? All those in favour?
What are we voting on? Adding in those words.
To allow you leave to do that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All those in favour? And I can see everybody saying yes, and that is carried. Back to you, Councillor Clark.
Can we make it, rather than plus, can we use and?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you for the assistance with grammar.
Can I just stop you there, Councillor Clark, so that the public can see what you're talking about, while you're talking, if it could be up on the screen, please. Thank you.
So, do you want me to read it, Mayor?
Yes.
So just so the community is clear, so the council requests that the state government dramatically increases, it should be, there's a spare in there, infringement fees to ensure serious deterrent, to ensure in serious deterrent to unauthorised activities. 2, to lobby the Minister for Planning to review the 1030 rule in urban areas as outlined in Council's advocacy letter to the Minister of Planning dated the 26th of May 2020. 3, to advocate to the state government for a review of an amendment to the Planning and Environment Act provisions to provide greater powers to authorised officers to cause cessation of unauthorised activity. And then 4, to request the local members, effectively the local members and the MAV to seek to support those amendments and argue the case with us, with the government, to make those changes.
Thank you. Over to you. Oh.
So, Mayor, just to go through the various points that I'm proposing here, and this frankly comes out of essentially at the moment one, but I'm sure we've had others, recidivist problem that we do have in the community, without naming names. Most notably, well, if you look at just at the actions that occurred in Diamond Street in North Eltham, which I worked on with Councillor Demerit, where trees were cut down illegally, fines were issued, and none of those have been paid. The guys just moved on as though nothing happens, and it's just a cost of doing business. Then you move to the exercise of about, and so what I'm saying is we need dramatically increased fees to ensure that those infringements, when they occur and proven in court, aren't just a cost of doing business. Effectively, it should be able to get to the point of, in my view, virtually jail terms. These people should be paying hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million for what they're doing, like the guys who knocked down the pub in Carlton. Destruction of our natural environment is just as important as the structure of the physical environment. And so we're going to have to get tough, not because it's an everyday occurrence, but there are some people that just will not obey the law. And then the issue about lobbying for planning to review the 1030 rule, because if they're not chopping down illegal trees, they're trying to maximise out a rule which was not designed for its purpose. That is, every tree you can remove, despite landscape overlays, despite all the other planning regulations councils put on, you can chop down every tree within 10 metres of a house, or indeed within, I think it's 4 metres of side boundaries, which again, in a residential block means you can basically denude the block of landscape. And then, of course, when people do this, and some of them act illegally, we find that we get called out with an expectation of residents, or we can issue notices and enforcement orders to stop people doing things. And we can't. We can't even walk onto the site. We've got to seek approval of the recalcitrant individuals to be able to get onto their site to prove what they're doing wrong. And then we've got to take them to the magistrates' court. We have no powers of cessation. And we've seen this time and time again where people have an expectation that we should be able to stop illegal activity. And we don't have the power. And it's a ludicrous situation. So we do need to find ways to deal with this. And we need to be able to have those laws strengthened both under the Planning Environment Act and whatever other acts are required. I have sought the advice, and this resolution doesn't just come from me in my words, but with the support of our officers about what would be the changes they would need to be able to achieve the outcomes that our community would expect of us. I mean, we spend an inordinate amount of money trying to create these protections. We spend a lot of money on planning schemes, on getting the planning rules right, and then get called out to try and fix the problems. And we find in reality we can't. And then there are people who are acting as we know they are at the moment, without any due care for local community and assets and for that local environment. Now, it's not new. It really isn't new. One particular developer in our town has done this on a number of different sites on a regular basis, intimidating individuals, intimidating our community, and just flouting the law. Well, from where I stand, it's got to stop. And if, you know, I've moved a whole bunch of resolutions leading up to this one tonight, going back some months. But this just sort of brings it to, and to be honest, after this resolution, there is nothing else. And so I really do call on the state government, on the Minister for Planning, and call on our local members who I'm sure would support, in essence, this cause that we're trying to raise. I don't think it's going to be a conflict between our local members supporting our community and the council on this. But we can't just let it drift. We've got to see real action. We've got to see it raised in the parliament. This is the sort of stuff that we should be in the parliament with the members using every opportunity to talk about how they need to protect their local community and how they need to protect their local environment, to be able to get the representations to the minister. I'm sure the mayor, certainly I am happy to join them. I'm happy as the chair of planning, and the mayor in her capacity or my capacity as deputy mayor, and other councillors would be happy to join the local members for deputations to the state government, because that's unfortunately what we've got to do. This is not about sort of shirking the issues from our end. We will do what we can do, and officers, I know residents are also frustrated at the moment by, they think we could do more, and you know, I see the CEO shaking his head, and I'm sure he's keen to do more, and we'll act on that as quickly as we can in the next few days. But I commend this resolution to the council. I remain very frustrated for our community members who want to do the right thing, and encourage them to support us in our efforts. Thank you.
Councillor Demerit.
Once again, I thank Councillor Clark for his cooperation with the work in Diamond Street. This is an issue that's particularly prevalent in Edendale, my particular ward. One of the developers who we have had legal proceedings against is on a number of sites, as you know, basically clear-felled and benches the block, and then advertises how come and live in Eltham in the treat environment, and it's a disservice, because you know, you can look out your window and look at other people's trees. I just don't want them on my block. And you know, you really, part of it is being together as a community and maintaining the tree canopy, maintaining so we're not looking into each other's houses and looking at roof lines. Rather, we're looking at, you know, lovely treat environments. I walk out the front door here every day and look over to the east side of Eltham and look at the trees. But you know, now you sort of hear, tends to seem to happen on, you know, Saturdays and Sundays, you hear the chainsaws running and trees just being knocked down You know, and the excuse is, oh, I love the trees, but I just don't want leaves in my gutter, or I don't want leaves in my pool. Well, you know, it's a certain amount we have to, for the great benefits they bring to us, and the health benefits, the climate benefits, you know, you have to sort of live with it. And, you know, it's a responsibility that needs to be shared by the whole community. We've got a rogue element that just come in, you clear every tree, you clear soil, do it on the weekend while no one's around. And, you know, the community's left holding the can, and you look out from your place, which has got some lovely trees on it, into a desolate block beside you. And it's just not reasonable. Eltham and Nillumbik have been synonymous with being the green wedge Shire, and, you know, really supporting flora and fauna, and to live with it and to work around it, and, you know, maintain it for the last 50, 100 years. And I'd like to see that going on into the future. I fully support Councillor Clark's motion, and do call on our local members to take our petition. As I said, we're more than happy to go along with them, take our petition to the Planning Minister, and get something serious done about this. So I know they fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demerick. Any other councillors? Councillor Perkins.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I of course support the motion, but I think council has to do its part in terms of being consistent across the Shire, and that goes to you know, council supporting the urgent work that is needed to be done, and that's the neighbourhood character study. Neighbourhood character study will underpin potentially the inclusion of significant landscape overlays in my ward, in Councillor Brooker's and Councillor Drumack's ward. You know, if only you know, my ward and much of Councillor Drumack's and much of Grant Brooker's wards had significant landscape overlays, we would have the opportunity even to challenge these developers who are chopping down trees illegally. Unfortunately, because we haven't updated our neighbourhood character study, and there's no SLOs over much of the urban parts of the Shire, it is only Eltham that can benefit from this motion at the moment. It's not to say I won't support it. I will support it, of course. But, you know, in terms of can council do more? If it thinks about the whole of the Shire, the other urban areas in Nillumbik, it certainly can. And it's about supporting a neighbourhood character study. It's about thinking about what other areas of Nillumbik in the urban parts need that protection that much of Eltham has got. And perhaps yeah, there's an argument that even more of Eltham needs a city landscape overlay. It'd be nice to have trees protected in the urban parts of the Shire generally, but you know, a lot of people in Diamond Creek think they are. Well, they're not. The reality is that if you ring up the planning department and ask them if you can cut down a tree, well, the answer invariably is going to be yes, unless you live in the activity centre and or the activity centre zone, and there's not many that actually do that. So the tree protections that exist are widespread in Eltham. They don't exist in other parts of the Shire, and that's something that we as a council really have to address, as well as ensuring that we try to get the penalties for people that breach those controls. Try to get those penalties increased. So there is more certainly that council can do, and you know, having great enforcement and great ability to catch up with the wayward developers that appear in Eltham. The unfortunate thing is that they can do exactly what they're doing in Eltham and do it totally legally. So that's my concern, but very happy to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. I just wanted to clarify something with our planning officer, because I was under the impression that the 1030 rule applied in every single bit of urban Nillumbik. It certainly applies out in the rural area, but we've got the 1050. Rosa, can you clarify that it already applies to Diamond Creek already?
I'm not talking about the 1030 rule. I was talking about significant landscape overlay.
Yeah, but that's what this particular notices of motion is about. Well, you've confused me then because of bringing that in. Thought
Well,
you
it's nothing that you know, my comments have nothing to do with the 1030 rule. Of course, the 1030 rule applies across the Shire. You know, what I'm saying is that because council hasn't recently done a neighbourhood character study, we haven't had the opportunity to bring in significant landscape overlays that protect the treed environment in areas outside of Eltham. That's the point I made. And you know, people can shake their heads, but that's a fact.
just not Eltham. Is that correct, Rosa? You need to unmute yourself, sorry. Unmute yourself. That's it.
Thank you. Through the chair. Councillor Perkins is correct that there are, well, the SLO3 doesn't apply to significant portions of Diamond Creek like it does to the Eltham area. And under that significant landscape overlay, there are provisions that state that a planning permit is triggered if works occur in and around 5 metres of a substantial tree. And that is above and beyond the zone provisions that apply in the normal residential zones.
So does the 1030 rule gazump that? Or
so the 1030 rule, yeah, is different to that, and it overrides the provisions of the planning scheme in that it allows for the clearing of trees within a certain distance of houses or established homes.
so that was actually just the point I was trying to make, Councillor.
Well, I think the point is that our rogue developer is not using, as far as I'm concerned, I don't think he's even using the 1030 rule to cut down trees. He's just acting in breach of the SLO3.
He is doing both.
He's using
both.
Well,
yep.
Yes.
All right. Thanks for the clarification, Rosa. Councillor Brooker. Oh, before you go, Rosa, I think Councillor Brooker has a question.
Sorry. Yeah, thanks. Just for Rosa, through the chair, we've talked about, I think for my benefit, and maybe also for the people from home, increases in infringement fees. What are the infringement fees now? We know the example of the Magistrates Court fine for the example we're kind of obliquely referencing, but what are the current fines, and what sort of scale, I suppose, are we talking about increasing them to?
Through the chair, with regard to the fines, they work on unit measurements. So that the exact figure I can't get you at this point in time, but it works in terms of penalty units, and so and that's triggered by the amount of unauthorised actions undertaken by the owner of the site or the person undertaking those unauthorised actions. The 38,000 was a figure that was achieved through a Magistrates Court application, and that was quite a substantial figure that we've not really seen before here at Nillumbik, and so it was a really good outcome. But there was clear evidence and documented evidence that goes to show that the actions were undertaken in an unauthorised manner. And there was documented, we had that documented clearly, and were able to successfully then therefore prosecute through the Magistrates Court. Without that clear documented evidence, the fines start to go down because it becomes trickier to get a favourable outcome if you haven't got those actions all clearly undertaken and documented.
All right, Councillor Merrick has a question as well.
Sorry, is Councillor Perkins' assertion that if we undertook neighbourhood character studies, that we would be able to, they would underpin better
outcomes?
No, not outcomes, better policy in this area, and therefore better outcomes?
Councillor.
Through the chair, undertaking a neighbourhood character study allows the assessment of an area to be undertaken, and that as is in the instance of many areas within Eltham, identifies that the character is based on the treed environment that exists in that neighbourhood. Now, if that is found to be the same case for parts of Diamond Creek, then certainly the character would identify the treed environment as being important, and then you can mount, I suppose, the justification for planning scheme provisions to protect vegetation in a particular area.
Thank you.
Clarified, Councillor Demerit? Councillor Clark.
I just wanted to say, having gone through this to help the officer, when we went the exercise on Diamond Street, just to recall that the maximum fees applicable currently were $200,000 using that unit system was the maximum fee that was applicable. We did argue to the Minister at the time that they should be increased up to $1 million or greater than that, but the maximum that was applicable was $200,000 and we got a $30,000 fine and $8,000 costs.
All right. Any other councillors wish to speak before we vote on the item? If not, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? And I'm sure that's unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Just a question to governance, please. Do I have to ask for an extension? Right. Not till 10:30, Councillor Ashton. We have no delegates' reports, but I do have 2 items of urgent business, and I'm exercising my power as the Mayor to admit 2 of them, well, both of them. The first one relates to the Growing Suburbs Fund, and we'll get that up on the screen.
And I'll move that as Chair of Social Infrastructure.
Right, there you go, Councillor Perkins. As per on the screen. Do you want to read it or?
Well, there was a second dot point that Yama emailed to all councillors. It doesn't look to have made your copy, and it talks about the amounts.
It's coming. Won't be a moment. Do you want to start reading those 2 anyway?
Yes, okay, it's there. And it is that Council endorses the following projects in order of priority to be submitted for funding through the 2021 Growing Suburbs Fund. Number 1, the upgrade of Ben Friley Reserve Pavilion, Hurstbridge. And number 2, installation of solar panels and complementary infrastructure at Eltham Leisure Centre. The second dot point is supports these projects through a council contribution, which A, leverages an existing, in brackets, smaller pavilion upgrade grant and financial year 2021 capital allocation of $352,000, as well as a loan provision of up to $500,000 in the 2021 budget for Ben Friley Pavilion, and leverages an existing 2021 capital allocation of $270,000 against solar panels at the Eltham Leisure Centre. Number 3, provides the CEO with delegation to approve contracts associated with any successful applications under the 2021 Growing Suburbs Fund program up to the total project cost identified in the submission.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. Can I have a seconder for the motion, please? Councillor Rankin, back to you, Councillor Perkins.
So the basis of the priority, and councillors have discussed it, is through officers, and officers have been doing some great work in this space, and particularly need to thank Heath Gillett and Yelma for their work here. But the conversations with the grant provider indicated that the one most likely to receive grant funding was Ben Friley Reserve Pavilion, Hurstbridge, so Hurstbridge Football Club, a new pavilion, and also they suggested that we prioritise installation of solar panels and complementary infrastructure at Eltham Leisure Centre as number 2. So that accounts for the priority order as recommended by officers. I'm happy to go with that. We've included the amounts that we're talking about. It's important that we understand the amounts, because that makes up part of the decision tonight, which is around borrowings. That, you know, without the provision to borrow up to $500,000 for the Hurstbridge Pavilion, you know, we couldn't really even apply for the grant. So that's in there. That's a project cost of about possibly up to $1.5 million. You know, we can apply for. We have to provide 50% of the grant funding. So we've got to put up about $850,000 for a project that could go. They haven't done the final costings yet, but it could go up to 1.5 million, between 1.3 and 1.5. The final QA hasn't been done yet, but it will be done before the grants are submitted. The solar panels at Eltham Leisure Centre, so there's $270,000 currently in the budget. That's for a total project cost of about $540. That will make the whole of the Eltham Leisure Centre, basically, it's great to do as part of our climate action plan. This has been a long-standing program in council to have the major community buildings on solar. It will also provide some vehicle charging spaces, much like has happened at Community Bank Stadium in Diamond Creek. It also reduces the ongoing costs of buying electricity for the Eltham Leisure Centre. It's expensive to run the Eltham Leisure Centre. It's important this project happen as well. So the Hurstbridge Football Club, great football club. There's only 2 football clubs that I like more than the Hurstbridge Football Club, and then of course there's the Diamond Creek Football Club and the Geelong Football Club in that order. If you ask me this time next year, Geelong would probably get moved up the list. But Hurstbridge Footy Club's a great club. I know a lot of the members, and ex-players at Hurstbridge. They're a tight-knit group. Their infrastructure down there isn't great. They've often complained to me about the size of the oval. They always wanted a larger oval. I believe that probably needs to happen at some stage. They can't play finals on their oval. It's my understanding. But certainly their pavilion, they got awarded a grant of I think it was 150. I think we were told before. They got some money from the state government around election time, but it really wasn't enough money to do the whole job. In fact, they had to provide disability compliant toilets, which would have taken out much of their social club rooms. So this grant, if successful, it will allow them to do that work on the disability compliant change rooms and bathrooms, toilets, but also retain a decent sized social club room. So it's a very important project. They're probably, I know we have done a lot of sports pavilions and other areas have benefited well from receiving grants. I hope that we are successful in the Growing Suburbs Fund for the Ben Friley Oval, and undoubtedly this is great news for them because we've allocated the money. If they don't get up this time, there's no reason to think that we wouldn't put them in the next GSF round. So we'll do the best application we can, hand it over to the state government, and hope that we do get a successful result out of Ben Friley and the Eltham Leisure Centre solar project. So looking for support from council. Thank you.
Councillor Rankin.
Thank you, Mayor. Just before I talk on the matter, Councillor Perkins, could you just recap some of those figures? You mentioned that we're borrowing over $1 million for these 2 projects. Can you just confirm that figure again with me?
No, I said we're borrowing 500,000 to $500,000, but it accounts for some of the borrowings that we've included in the budget. So other grant rounds that we've allocating money towards. So we know the community sport infrastructure stimulus program that we resolved the other week requires a budget allocation, and that one's closer to $1 million. But this one is $500,000. So it helps to account for the $3.3 million in borrowings. $1.1 million to pay 0%, and the rest is for grants. That we have to put money on the table. We have to demonstrate to the state government if we're applying for a grant that we can fund our portion.
Cool. Sorry, I just thought you said that we needed to borrow $1 million plus for these 2 projects. So I'm glad you've clarified that. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Over, and it's your turn to speak, Councillor Rankin.
Thank you. I think in support of these projects, I think the Ben Friley Pavilion certainly needs a long and overdue upgrade as well. I think it's a very good project to be putting forward. The solar panels at the Eltham Leisure Centre, that just continues our environmental sustainability component in our council plan. I think that if both of these grant applications come off, I think that's certainly terrific and a great advocate, or a great piece of work that the team have gone and delivered. Again, I'd like to thank Yelma particularly and his team, which include Enrique and Heath, to be able to get these up and going. I think these guys are doing an amazing job, yeah, look forward to hopefully being successful yet again with some more grants. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rankin. Any other councillors wish to speak? If not, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. Thank you, councillors. I also have another item of urgent business, again through Councillor Perkins. Do you wish me to read it, Councillor Perkins? Or you can read it. Would you like to?
Yeah, I can read it. I don't know if you put it on. Oh, I'm muted. Am I there?
Yes, you're there. Have you got? It's on the screen now. Can you see?
Okay, so I move to abandon number 1, abandon the current draft Nillumbik housing strategy. Number 2, prioritise a new Nillumbik neighbourhood character study and community reference group to inform any future Nillumbik housing strategy. And number 3, advise all submitters of this change via email/mail on the Nillumbik website and other communication channels.
And do you have a seconder, Councillor Perkins?
I don't know.
Councillor Clark, over to you. This is an amazing night.
Well,
Councillor Perkins and Councillor Clark and seconding each other's motions. Back to you, Councillor Perkins.
thank you, Mayor. So you know.
No
sorry.
interruptions, Councillor Clark.
What did he say?
It's the tie that got me.
Councillor Perkins.
I don't have any red ties, but I'll certainly go and buy one because I don't want to masquerade as a Liberal Party member. Apparently I look a bit like a Lib tonight, which is not good. But anyway, hopefully the time hasn't started. Look, abandon the draft, the current draft Nillumbik housing strategy. That's what we're trying to achieve tonight. I wish it had have happened before we put it out to public consultation, which is what I argued for at the time. I was never supportive of it. I don't like its direction. I certainly don't like that it's preceded the most important work that we need to do outside the Greenwich Management Plan, which was a neighbourhood character study. So look, it snuck up. It snuck up on us a bit by surprise. The neighbourhood housing strategy. It's fair to say we haven't had, really the input as councillors that I might have expected. And I've never been supportive of it. Once I saw the work of one consultant comes to council in a draft, well, the balloon went up as far as I was concerned in terms of its direction and what it did, which was effectively the way it looks. And I know it perhaps wasn't the intent, but the way it's played out is advocating for a planning scheme that would encourage medium density housing across really all the urban parts of Nillumbik. So it's not a good one. It certainly hasn't been received well from the public. It would never be received well from the public in its current form. The important work that needs to be done is in dot point number 2, and it's a neighbourhood character strategy, because it's a current neighbourhood character strategy that was really informing the draft housing strategy as presented. And so the cart was well and truly before the horse. The argument was put. It wasn't successful at the time, but hoping it will be now that we've had the opportunity to hear from community in terms of what they think of their notion of putting the cart before the horse. If we do and even the document in its own right spells this out, that it's a neighbourhood character study and a neighbourhood character policy that should underpin and inform a housing strategy. So we've got to all work on this together, but it is a process. It's going to take a little bit longer and undoubtedly a bit more money. But to me, going into the next council, it will be as important, if not as important as the Greenwich Management Plan. And that's the sort of status we've got to give the neighbourhood character study. And then ultimately, that will feed into the housing strategy. I think it's important that all submitters be advised of what's going on. They've certainly made submissions. There's people that are geared up, to present at a future Nillumbik committee meeting and rattle our chains somewhat. Look, unfortunately, you mightn't get that opportunity if this motion goes through. It's I think it's fair to say some other councillors have had a little bit of a change of heart in terms of what the best approach is, and continuing on with this draft housing strategy in its current form is hopefully now not the preferred outcome for the majority of council. So happy to put the motion. I'm encouraged that Councillor Clark has seconded the motion. Look, I won't. I'll leave Councillor Clark to speak for himself, but I'm just happy to get support from wherever I can find it. And if that's Councillor Clark, that's fantastic. And I'm happy to have Councillor Clark finally in the tent. It's a really, really positive outcome. It's taken a little while, but I'm glad we're here, and we can trash this housing strategy together, and get rid of it and go back to where we should be, and concentrating on the neighbourhood character study, because as we know, that's what their ratepayers want. I think John Jemerick put it well at a briefing that we should be working for the current ratepayers, for the people who are living here now, not the future ones that want to buy in, or the imaginary people that want to put units and medium intensity. Look, in Diamond Creek, I know parts of Diamond Creek where that has happened. Rangeview Estate's a classic example. It is hated. I had nothing to do with that decision, but I came on council as they were getting built, and I copped it, and that was just a very, very poor development that was born from this notion of, we've got to increase. The state government wants us to build more houses, or allow more houses to be built. So this is what we've got to encourage medium density. In Diamond Creek, we've got lots of new development happening. Where Diamond Creek is well and truly carrying our fair share with all the development north of Diamond Creek. But the policy is bad across the Shire, not just Diamond Creek. So I'm happy to have some support. I didn't have a couple of weeks ago.
Councillor Clark, wake up.
What a great speech, Councillor Perkins. Look, I'm happy to reserve my right until I hear some others might want to say something on this meeting.
Councillors wish to speak. It's been the flavour of the month. Councillor Jemerick.
I'll be supporting this motion. I do honestly believe that the interests of the current ratepayers, the people who pay for these things to be done, should be first and foremost in any decisions we make. And to that effect, I don't think that this document takes into account the wishes and wants and needs of the current ratepayers. So I would like to see us come back with a more modest document based soundly on a neighbourhood character study and on, as I said, genuine community engagement and genuine community consultation. So I fully support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Jemerick. Councillor Rankin.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I support Councillor Perkins on this motion. Maybe as a group, we didn't give the officers a clear direction. We sit and we talk as a group that we need to provide funds for projects, for consultation, to be able to get reports up and strategic plans and stuff, and that costs the ratepayers money. And I'm not sure where we've got it wrong here, but I do support Councillor Perkins on this. But I think maybe we need to be clearer in our direction to the officers, and clearer as to what the community is really looking for, so that we get the next document right, because this has cost the team time and money, and which has cost the ratepayer. But I think that the guys have put an enormous amount of effort into the document, but it's not what we or the community are actually looking for. So I am supporting you on this one, Councillor Perkins.
Councillor Rankin, any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Ashton.
I think that what happens inside the urban growth boundary in Nillumbik is as important as what happens outside in the Green Wedge. I think we are a Shire and we're united with a lot of values. And so I think our urban centres reflect what's happening in the rural areas. And I think that, you know, that we all wish to retain the rural character to this Shire. And I think that I understand that we do have a requirement from government to submit a housing strategy. I really do get that. And I think her offices actually have done a lot of work, and they probably won't need to replicate of what they've already done. But I think there are some basic flaws there. However, they are working within quite strict guidelines as you know, with regard to proximity to schools, railway stations, public transport, existing infrastructure. So I think I think some of the figures were blown up. My understanding that we were only looking at additional capacity for, I think it was 3,200 to 600 residents, and I think at one stage that was stated as being 13,000, which I don't necessarily think is accurate. But again, I think we need to be really clear with these type of plans is why we're doing them, what the requirements are, and how we're trying to do the best job possible. So yeah, I think we need to spend more time on this, and I think, you know, it's important for the Shire wide, and this is the Green Wedge Shire, so we need to work together on things like this. So yeah, I'll be supporting the recommendation.
Before you speak, Councillor Booker, I just need a motion to go in to extend time. We're nearly at past, and I know Councillor Booker will take 3 minutes, so that'll bring us up to past. So could I have a mover and a seconder to go? Councillor Rankin, seconded Councillor Perkins. All those in favour? And that is carried. Over to you, Councillor Booker.
Look, I'm actually intrigued to hear what Councillor Clark has got to say about this issue. So if he doesn't mind, he's been reserving his right all night, wasn't he? You know, say something.
Is that the end of what you wanted to say?
Speech, Councillor Brooker.
Sorry, Councillor Booker, can you...
Yeah, go right ahead, Councillor Clark. He seconded the motion. I mean, go ahead.
So that was your 3 minutes you just had?
No, I'd like to speak, but I'd like to hear from Councillor Clark.
Well,
you can't stop and start. Councillor Clark's reserved his right to speak, so you need to finish. I'm sorry, that's not how this works.
It's a very intriguing notion, isn't it? I reserve my right to speak, so I'll be the grand kind of person at the end who has the last word. I think we need to do something about this.
No, over to you, Councillor Brooker. You're losing your time. Keep going.
But the time clock hasn't started yet that I can see. So can you see it? Thank you. Look, I think there's some very flexible positions being taken on this housing strategy. 2 weeks ago, there was 3 councillors voted against this strategy going out for consultation for different reasons. And I'll recap the reasons. Councillor Perkins' objection to this going out for consultation was that the content of the plan was wrong for Nillumbik, really. It was the medium density housing aspect he thought was too much, in particular in Diamond Creek, and that would lead to bad planning or bad housing outcomes, bad planning outcomes, and so wanted to not have it go out for consultation, which is a very big step, I think, for it not to go. Councillor Dumarek was, I think, in part of that mind as well, and partly talking about neighbourhood character as also, so which was my position and which was widely pilloried 2 weeks ago. that why on earth would you be placing such importance on neighbourhood character? 2 weeks later, Councillor Clark is in the local newspaper talking about how important neighbourhood character is in relation to some illegal tree removal, and here we are tonight. So the framework itself in the housing strategy had 3 components, and my point was we weren't doing them. We had the housing strategy, the neighbourhood character strategy, and other strategic work, the 3-legged stool that contributed to a housing framework. That is the apparatus that was put in place. And I said, and Councillor Demerick and Councillor Perkins, we don't have the neighbourhood character. We don't have this. We've got a 2-legged, stool. It won't stand up. Don't do this. 2 weeks later, the 2-legged stool has collapsed. The housing strategy is in tatters. And I'm very interested to hear an explanation as to what was not important 2 weeks ago is suddenly important tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Brooker, over to you, Councillor Clark.
Well, first off, Councillor Brooker is assuming I want to speak, but anyway.
You've reserved your right all night. You don't have to speak. So.
Brooker,
I reserved my right to determine whether I wanted to speak, and that's the rules under the debate. I was simply looking for it. Councillor Perkins was looking a seconder. I indicated to him earlier in today I would second the motion. Look, in short, this document has gone out in a manner which I am unhappy with because it's not bringing the community with us. And what I mean by that is there are a whole bunch of documents that are up on our website and Participate website that seek to explain it suburb by suburb about what the ramifications of this policy will be. And I don't think those documents are helpful. In fact, I think they scare the community as much as anything else, and they don't tell the story that is in the actual document. And I don't think it is helpful to continue down a track where the community becomes scared of a policy direction, where they ought not be scared of a policy direction, because of, in my own view, our own failure to communicate that story properly. There is no doubt the issue of neighbourhood character strategy is important. And we needed to tell the community where that's going to fit into this conversation. I never denied a fortnight ago that that was not an important part of the piece, the puzzle. The question is, how does it fit into the overall strategy? The strategy is still a document about diversity of housing stock, not quantum of. But nonetheless, we didn't tell the story about how, as Councillor Ashton rightly points out, we're only talking, less than 4,000 dwellings in 15 years right across the Shire. Indeed, we would have the lowest rate of growth right throughout the Shire. We didn't create a document which set out to the community what the advantages are in managing what is required of us by the state in terms of a housing policy. We didn't tell any of those stories. And what we did with the documents that are on our website is leave the issues either up in the air or remaining of concern. And so I agree with the premise that we need a reference group to work with officers to get this right, because it hasn't got, Councillor Rankin asked before, what's sort of gone wrong here. It is our communication strategy that has not played out well here and has left the community confused and wondering, and almost with an argument that says this is targeting massive development, 13,000 dwellings throughout the Shire. It's nonsense. It was never going to do that, and nor is our intention to do that. But we've got to tell that story, and we've got to tell it well. We've got to bring the community with us, and we've got to work with the community. I think there should be a reference group to work with the community, recommence the work that has started, and get this story right so that we get an outcome that the community does support, not one that they're going to fight with us on over the next months and months and months ahead. It's a good base document, but we need to get the story right. We need to set up a reference group. We need to manage it correctly. Thank you.
Councillor Clark. I think everybody's had to speak. Yes, I've lost track now. We'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? And that is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. I need a mover to go into confidential, please, and to the gallery back out there in Zoom land. Thank you for your attendance tonight, because you won't see us again. And hopefully at our next meeting, we won't have as many technical difficulties. So thank you to everybody watching, and good night from us. And could I now have a seconder to go into confidential? So Bruce.
No.
Councillor Rankin, you moved the motion. Councillor Clark seconded. All those in favour? Councillor Brooker, all those in favour? And that is carried. Thank you.